We have an evacuation procedure. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the room calmly via the lobby area at the main door of the City Hall. Turn right, walk down the ramp towards the cathedral, and we assemble in front of the cathedral. I'd like to welcome the public who are attending and who are in the room with us, and those watching on the webcast at home or at work. To those in the room, and I think this is really important, please, that we say this before every single meeting at City Hall, that to those in the room we ask that everyone speaks with courtesy and respect in order to have an exchange of views. And on this particular occasion, we have rejected some questions in consultation with the legal department, which we believe to be offensive and potentially defamatory. So I apologise if anyone feels that hard done by. That is not something I do lightly. I'd like to welcome members of the committee and ask them to introduce yourselves, especially new members of the committee. So I'm going to start with Tim. And Tim, thank you for stepping up and becoming the vice chair of this committee.
You're welcome. Councillor Tim Rippington, Brislington East Ward for Labour.
Councillor Self, Southmead Labour.
Nicholas Coombs, Westbury and Henleys.
Mark Weston, Henbury and Brentry.
Councillor Emma Edwards, Bishopston and Ashley Down.
Councillor Toby Wells for Knoll.
Councillor Serena Ralston, Clifton Down.
I'd also like to thank Graham Morris, who's not here, but he's been a great vice chair to work with for the last 2 years. So if you're watching, Graham, I'm sure you are, then thank you very much for all your help. And maybe, Mark, if he's not watching, you could pass on my thanks to him.
Wrong way, Chair, but I really hope he's not watching.
No comment. We have no apologies, although I have been just notified that Councillor Tom Renard is likely to be here in about an hour's time. He's had a clash. Have we got anyone, would any members of the committee like to declare an interest? Any interest declared will be recorded in the minutes? No. I move that the minutes of the previous meeting of the committee held on the 19th of March as a correct record. Tim, as per convention, I'm going to invite the Vice Chair to second that, and we'll do that for at least this meeting, just to warm you up in your new role.
I'll second that.
So is everyone happy that I can affirm the minutes as a correct record and sign them? Yes. Okay. Chair's announcements. The only announcement I really have is that officer decision notices have been published between meetings as ever, as we get things done. Just before we go to the public forum, I'd just like to invite John Smith to say something about the way we conduct ourselves mutually in this meeting and as part of the public forum.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I did just want to say two things, particularly around public forum, from an officer perspective. So firstly, speaking for myself and the whole team, public forum is very important. We do take it seriously. There are some quite tight deadlines around submissions of questions and responses. And I'd just like to observe that the team have answered 126 public forum questions as part of this meeting. So I'd just like to say thank you very much to them for that. The second important point I wanted to say is that obviously as officers we are public servants, and it's right that we can be questioned and held to account. And of course it's fine to disagree. I don't have to make that point to people in the gallery. However, we do expect officers to be treated with respect and not abused or threatened. I'm afraid that's just not acceptable. And we will act if we consider that to be the case. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So, as ever in this committee, we go through the public statements first. Hopefully anyone who's here knows that we try and keep those to 1 minute. So it's a summary of what you've written rather than necessarily of what you've written. I'm going to go through the people that have indicated that they were coming here to speak in order. So first up is Helen Hughes. So Helen, nice to see you once again, Helen.
Is that on? Yeah. Thank you. So my statement was submitted quite a few weeks ago. I was on it quite quickly, and a lot of things have happened since then. It referred to what was coming out back then about the data that the council had published regarding through traffic in Southville, and that it appeared that there was a complete lack of data proving that there was through traffic, which is needed. This proof is needed in order to access the funding for a livable neighbourhood through modal filters. Since then, the council has published some more data, some ARUP data and some flu data, which there have been a lot of questions in the public forum for this meeting about this data. In my statement, I mentioned that it felt like data was being cherry-picked by the council, by this committee, by the chair, in order to prove points that not other people weren't quite so sure about. So I just want to point out that those questions and statements about, well, the questions particularly about the ARUP and flu data have not really been answered by the council, by the chair, by the people answering these questions. There's been a generic copy and paste response to almost all of them, which seems to be not honouring the spirit of actually answering the questions that the officers and the councillors are being asked. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. And as John said, we do take these very seriously. We are determined to be publicly accountable and to enable scrutiny, but it is very difficult when these come in on a Friday, and we need to answer them within a certain amount of time, so we've done our best. Next, Melissa. Hello, Melissa.
Thank you. I'm here today representing many who are exhausted and disgusted. For 2 years, the Green administration has treated disabled residents as obstacles to a scheme baked in before consultation. To the chair of this committee, blaming protesters for fines is a cowardly move that incites division. By admitting signage is illegible, yet activating cameras, you are engaging in predatory enforcement. Your rhetoric fuels the systemic abuse we face daily. We are hounded by those who can walk and cycle, yet you ignore the active harm we suffer while offering co-design to others. The Melaseki 2026 research confirms this. You've created environmental privilege for some while imposing spatial injustice on many. This is discrimination. Scrap the blocks and stop using us as a scapegoat for your failure to follow the law. We deserve a city that includes us by design, not one that excludes us and vilifies us by consequence. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Next on my list is Amber Eastman.
Yeah, thank you. As of the 8th of May 2026, 75 business owners across Southville formally registered their views through a voluntary and independent survey being taken by Southville residents on the proposed SBLN measures. The results are impossible to ignore, and I would like to state on public record that of those surveyed so far, well over 80% of business owners have opposed the scheme. The owners have also expressed in writing their grave concerns about the long-term viability of their businesses if the current BCC LTN proposals proceed in their present form. These are not abstract objections or passing concerns, but the harsh reality facing the majority of independent, I've lost it, I'm sorry, one moment. Yeah, independent traders, cafes, retailers, service providers and community institutions who all rely on accessible streets, passing trade, ease of parking, delivery of goods and functional traffic flow to survive. Equally important in the survey responses are contributions from community centres and places of worship who collectively serve thousands of people in BS3 and act as vital lifelines for the local community. They too require an ease of access and adequate parking to ensure they remain accessible to all who depend on them. Yeah, sure. I want to ask the Council and committee members why such significant and potentially irreversible traffic interventions are being pursued without clear publicly available evidence of their long or short-term economic impact on the local community and economy.
Thank you. Matt.
Hi. To qualify for funding, a livable neighbourhood scheme must include modal filters, with the express intention being to eliminate through traffic. So to justify the unwanted side effects of modal filters, there must be a significant proven quantity of traffic which is cutting through Southville. Yet the council is still unable to provide any specific numbers. But without any numbers, there is no proven issue with through traffic. And without through traffic, there can be no modal filters. And without modal filters, there is no funding. And without funding, there is no livable neighbourhood. So what are the numbers?
Thanks, Matt. Zoe Mack.
Over the last few months, the Council has cited a number of reasons for the SPLN: rat running, pollution, and safer streets for walking and cycling. Rat running, Matt Sanders' well-publicised research that the fundamental lie flies in the face of any of that. Pollution. The Council's sole Southville pollution monitor demonstrates a fall in pollution year on year. Safety. As of the 2024 survey, Southville asked the Council to address North Street and Coronation Road to improve safety. Instead of acting on this simple request, you've since taken 2 years trying to shoehorn an expensive and unworkable scheme onto us. In the meantime, there has been 2 deaths and a further accident. Having told us that the intention now is to scale back the original scheme, why does this still include some roadblocks? Southville has said no to these. MP Karen Smith has written an open letter to reiterate: this council must listen to voters and ensure that any changes to Southville, whether that be trees or crossings, consider the needs of businesses and locals in ensuring there is parking. And can I just, at the last meeting, I specifically asked a question about the charge that Arup made for the SPLN plan, and Adam Crowther said he would get back to me, but I don't know at what stage you're getting back to me on it.
I think we'll note that, but it's not time for questions right now. So
no, I'm aware of that. I
we'll note that and
okay.
make sure that I don't know if that's an action that we've got recorded that's still in progress. Okay, it is an action that's been recorded, and what I forgot to say about the minutes is that there's a number of outstanding actions which we're still chasing. Next is Kelly Smallcombe. Not here. Meg Smith.
Thank you. Problem, reaction, solution. It's a variation on the classic Machiavellian fabricated external enemy manipulation of public opinion and society. And it's called the Hegelian dialectic, and we see it in a lot of regimes that are happening all over the world. In layman's terms, government wants power over the people, and the people will not give this freely, so they create or exploit a problem, blaming it on others. The people react and ask the government for help, and the government offers a solution that was planned long before the crisis. Now, when we learn to spot this, we see it happening in local, and we've seen it happening in Bristol City Council. There's a perceived problem of the roads, too much pollution, pedestrians not being looked after, and we're going to have the livable neighbourhoods, and this is clearly much part of a much bigger agenda, and that's the solution. What's happened recently is that the problem in Southville, namely the rat running from Coronation Road to North Street, before we got to the reaction of the people, as in the disgust of that happening and the solution of the roadblocks, we had an interception by a very astute resident who studied...
Megs, can you wrap it up now? That's well over a minute.
Who studied the spreadsheets. Basically, we never got to problem reaction solution because it got intercepted. There was a glitch in that system. So basically, can people realise this is not a grassroots innovation? If you look at Agenda 2030,
Megs,
17 sustainable goals, and you'll find the answer of why this is going on. Thank you.
Thanks, Megs. David Redwell.
Of no bus service in Stapleton, 4 buses a day from every half an hour. Number 50 was killed off. I don't know why.
Sorry, can I just try and do that again?
The number 50 was killed off, Ed, and at the moment those people are cut off. So that's at Begbrook, Stapleton, and Frenchhead. And I hope that we can have some constructive conversations, some money from Bristol with Helen, the mayor, and we can find a way of restoring those bus services. And although I've been in a hospital bed for a few months, I've also been stuck in Stapleton talking to communities. And this is the only route at the moment we seem to have a problem with. The rest of the network, if the funds come in right for the ones we're going to put in place, will cover off most of the city region. I'm really worried this one's not covered, really. And all I'm going to say to you, can we just get those bus lanes built on the A37, get the drop curbs in, and just build, because we need bus priority measures, and I might have a different view about bus gates to others in Barton Hill. I just leave them or move them. But bus priority in this city needs to happen, including all the works around the Horseman Sphere. I'll be the first to...
Thanks, Dave. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Thank you.
Yeah, but thank you, and just keep on with that bus.
Dan Aykroyd. Can't see Dan. Caroline Dunn. I can't see Caroline. Alexandra Veitch, is it? Veitch, sorry, Alexandra. Well, and we do have people watching online, so we do use the microphone, please.
Okay, so I've got a very specific question. I agree with Helen that quite often questions are not answered directly. And this was a question that I asked last year. If we are parking, you're taking parking spaces away, a lot of parking spaces, and yet we already have a parking problem, as identified in the 2024 questionnaire. The data that came out in 2025 listed that first. And yet, what happened, this has happened to me, that I arrived back late at night from a long car journey, and there was nowhere, absolutely nowhere to park in the Southfield zone. So when that happens, and that's going to happen regularly to people on a daily basis, it'll happen to someone, where do we park safely and without penalty? Because there needs to be a plan. You can't just cut down the parking, keep issuing the parking permits and taking the revenue, and not having a plan B for when we can't park, because this will become the reality if current proposals go ahead.
Thank you. Is there anyone here who's submitted a statement who hasn't had a chance to speak? We're just on the cusp of 15 minutes worth of statements, so we can... Okay, I'm going to move us on to questions. First person is James Ward. James, are you here? So what we've had, just to remind everyone that everyone's had a written answer to their question, and everyone is permitted to ask either one, depending on how many questions you've submitted, either 1 or 2 supplementary oral questions. So hopefully on the screen as we speak, your question and your answer are there to be seen. Hopefully you've been able to read that, James. And do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I have 2 follow-up questions. My first is...
I'm afraid I can only give you one because you only asked one question. Oh, it is 2. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You've got 2. Let's do each in turn.
My lucky day. So the first follow-up question is that you're following recent local election wins, particularly for green controlled councils emerging around places like London. I'm wondering if Bristol Council has plans to work with the new administrations in those councils to encourage wider adoption of measures to tackle car spreading, this trend towards heavier, larger cars and SUVs, to see not just 1-2 council piecemeal adopt these measures, but to see it across the country, and also to establish best practice. My second question is that this...
Should we give... I don't know if Adam or Sean wants to say anything about that. I can say that we'll certainly be collaborating with... we're always willing to collaborate with councils, any other councils that have a similar agenda to ours, whatever their political makeup. So yes, we will be learning from and hoping to also influence the sort of policy agenda as we go forwards. And it does seem to me that there's an increasing groundswell of opinion that we need to do something about SUVs because they are more dangerous and more damaging to our roads. So we will be looking at what policy levers we can put in place. Obviously, some of those are national. I don't know if there's anything else officers want to add to that. Not really. Okay.
Is this working? So my second follow-up question relates to the national issue. Will the council communicate to the Department for Transport excuse me, sorry, I've got the wrong question. My question is that the policies need to be based on the best evidence available. Currently, that's a bit of a challenge because the Department for Transport doesn't make available crash data that includes vehicle type. So you don't know if vehicle collisions are happening with small cars, big cars, we don't know. And that's the Stats 19 data that comes from DFT. So my question is, will the council or members of the committee perhaps write to DFT and ask that data be improved so that councils can base policies on the best available data about road danger caused by bigger vehicles? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so the accident data comes from police reports. I know they do record the type of vehicle. So I guess that data must exist. We could certainly write a letter along those lines if the chair is keen for us to.
James, I think if you wanted to, the best way to trigger that would be to email me, and then I'll take it forward, respond to that email, if that's okay. I think it's a very interesting idea, and I'm not going to answer entirely off the cuff, but thank you for your question. The next I have is Matt. Matt, to your question around 20 miles an hour roads, the signage.
Regarding the 20 mile an hour speed limit consultation, I suggested the council should not create more 20 mile areas unless they demonstrate they have the budget to maintain the signage, which should look like this. Because most of the signs installed 16 years ago are now faded to white, obscured by trees and algae, tilted, broken, facing the
Matt,
wrong
as
way,
ever,
or entirely missing, like this.
Matt, as ever, if you can try and make... I love your visual cues, Matt. That's great.
Yes, okay.
If you could try, we do try and share the time out fairly. There's a lot of people here today, so I would like to try and get straight to a question.
The officer response said you have the budget to install new signs, but admits you cannot afford to pay to properly maintain them. So my question is, did you know that last year I was prosecuted by the police for speeding in St Luke's Road, but I pleaded not guilty and submitted evidence of all these defective signs which I passed on my route? Yesterday was the date of my trial at Bath Magistrates Court, but last week the Crown Prosecution Service told me they were dropping the case because they'd looked at my evidence and I would obviously win. But if these signs were not good enough to inform me of the 20 mile an hour speed limit in St Luke's Road, then they were not good enough to inform all the thousands of other people who have been prosecuted on this road. The police enforcement officer notified the council 6 times that signage in St Luke's Road is not good enough, but the council failed to correct it any of those times, so the police just continued with the enforcement anyway and prosecuted thousands of people. So my question is, will the chair acknowledge that the council's maintenance of its 20 mile per hour signage is simply not good enough?
I'm going to ask Sean Taylor to...
Thank you, Chair. Yes, obviously we would love enough budget to maintain every single asset within the city to a very high standard. We have to use our funds for health and safety risks, for everything which every asset is there to maintain it and look after it and keep it safe for all users of the network. I will, however, confirm that I gave approval for an order to a contractor to order 90 new signs in that area to be installed in the coming months.
Okay, we move on. Next up is Barry Cash. Is Barry here? No. Next is Laura Hinmarsh and Beth Richards. Are you here? No? Okay. Melissa, you've got up to 2 supplementary questions.
The response to question 40 states that model filters will only be fully in line with emergency minimum widths if a scheme is made permanent. Can the council confirm if a formal swept path analysis was physically completed for trial junctions to mitigate the reversing traps and pavement mounting mentioned? If so, why is this specific safety assessment being withheld from the public forum?
Yeah, we do tracks of schemes. I'd have to check each one. I haven't checked each individual one, but we do track schemes to make sure that they're passable. It's not something we would generally release as a technical drawing.
The one that was done prior to the EBLM, please. My second supplementary, regarding the response to question 41, the provided ArcGIS link contains mapped locations, but not the raw, unredacted 2022 baseline traffic data set used for the funding bid. Given the council's claim in question 42 that there is no difference in approach between schemes, will the council commit to a specific date for the release of the raw data to follow for independent verification of the scheme's justification and its impact on residents?
I mean, data is checked and kind of then released in a format that is understandable. I think we can see with some of the misunderstanding around the SPLN data that raw data can be incorrectly interpreted. We've gone through all the data for EBLN and we've published the appropriate data.
Okay, next we have Sue Hughes. Is Sue here?
No, I don't believe so.
No. Katie Sullivan?
After I read every answer you gave to the questions about the EBLN and the SPLN today, I decided to get AI to analyse the quality of your responses, and its verdict was that 75% of the questions failed to receive answers. The analysis showed a heavy reliance on repetition, with 56% of answers using identical copy and paste text, and there was frequent circular referrals back to the data pack that residents had already deemed insufficient that led them to ask their question. Why do you believe it's acceptable to provide dismissive responses that fail to answer questions rather than answer them properly in good faith?
We make every effort to answer the questions. Sometimes the volume of questions means that we provide something of a generic response. Okay. Well, it is an answer. I think one of the things we're going to be doing is, I suggest that anyone who thinks they haven't got an acceptable answer, as soon as possible, submit your question again. And the longer we have to answer the questions, the better the quality of the answers we'll be able to give you. Did you have another question?
The council's Facebook post 2 days ago that threatened police action towards vandalism of the EBLN infrastructure triggered a deluge of over 550 highly critical and furious public responses that constitutes a devastating condemnation of the Council's implementation of the EBLN and the tone deafness of this particular post. The Council can't still be under the impression that they have public support for this busgate move or for the EBLN itself. I will repeat my second question, which you didn't actually answer today. Will you honour the request proposed by Tom Renard and suspend any further changes to the EBLN until the decision, which is due in July?
No. I can't see Councillor David Wilcox. Tim Clay, are you here? Right. Helen Hughes.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with my second, follow-up to my second question, which was about e-scooters and the dangers they present in the city and how the council appears to support them in spite of doing their best to try to prevent any accidents happening in what they call the livable neighbourhood areas. A quote from the response: "Unfortunately, there are casualties, as there are with all transport modes, but also personal safety benefits for some people, e.g. from not having to walk home alone late at night." I just want to note that that applies to cars as well. But I want to ask, why are casualties from e-scooters, caused by e-scooters, acceptable when those caused by cars are not?
Well, we've made it very clear that this council has adopted a Vision Zero approach, which means that we're trying to get to zero deaths and there's minimal casualties from any form of transport. So they're not.
Don't understand how that answers my question.
Just to say that, you know, the response does refer to the fact that there's a lot of illegal private high-powered e-scooters that are out there that can be involved in incidents as well, which is a concern for us. I'd agree with the chair. We don't want any incidents to happen, but as people move around, they do tend to happen. We have the Vision Zero target where we'd like to get that down to zero, and that is our ambition.
So did you have a second supplementary question, Helen?
I'll take that one away and think about it, what you just said, because it didn't seem to make sense to me. Yes, so my first question was about the Southfield data and the cherry picking of data by council, what appeared to be cherry picking. And I asked, so I got the generic response to that question, and I wanted to ask the question again, as Katie has asked us again. Oh, by the way, before I do that, James, Chris McAvoy has analysed the traffic collision data by vehicle. If you look on his blog, Bristol Uncovered, you'll find it. Just wanted to say that. Can the chair explain why he has the right to cherry pick data when he tells other people not to? I can see that you're going to say you don't cherry pick data, but it's been very kind of obvious from the work that's been done by Matt and by others, by analysts, including Chris, that it does look like data has been cherry picked. So I just want to hear an explanation of why you feel that's okay for you to do it when you're asking the public not to.
I think what I've seen is that there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the data is telling us. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Adam.
I think we very clearly said up to certain percentages. We're not saying that's the continuous percentage. Obviously, it varies throughout the day. We're highlighting that it's an issue and it can be as bad as that. I think that's fairly clear.
Is Dan Aykroyd here? No, he's not, is he? Right, I think we've got time for one more question, and I certainly wouldn't want to cut Matt Sanders off in his prime. So, Matt, I'll give you the last question, even though we're just at the end of the half an hour. Wouldn't look good for me I certainly want to invite you to have a follow-up question. Can you try really hard, please, Matt, to turn it into a question rather than a series of statements with a question at the end?
I didn't think you'd get to me, so I didn't prepare anything, so yes. My question was about rally. So the SBLN modal filters thing is being reduced, but still mainly focused on Raleigh Road. So I asked what data of through traffic supports that, and the answer is basically just 2,500 cars drive along that road every day, and that's quite a lot. So some of them must be through traffic. That's apparently the thinking process. So 2 weeks ago, the council published the flu traffic map, which and cherry-picked the 85% through traffic figure, which was just referred to a minute ago. Even though at the same time of day, the same road has 60% and 40% as well. But all of those numbers are completely meaningless because flu's definition of through traffic, using the words through traffic, seems to be entirely different to everybody else's definition of through traffic.
Let's turn it into a question, please, Matt.
Okay. Do you genuinely believe, and maybe this is one for Adam, it's a technical one, do you genuinely believe that at any time of the day, on any day of the week, the traffic in Raleigh Road is 85% through traffic, or any of the other numbers on the flu data, 85% through traffic, i.e. traffic which is cutting through the Southville zone from one side to the other without stopping for legitimate reasons? Is that what those numbers mean? It is through traffic according to the definition that everybody else has been using for the last 5 years.
And that's what the explanation says, doesn't it?
Well, it isn't. It isn't.
It's not what the data shows, and so the answer is that we believe what the data tells us. I am going to allow David Redgewell a follow-up, a supplementary question as well. I've realised that I'm going to extend it by 5 minutes just because we have got one other person in the room who's asked a question. So either.
Genuinely believe that is through traffic using the same definition that everyone else is using. Yes, you do them. You do.
I believe I'm going to move on to Dave.
Welcome the work you're doing on buses and Tim. I really do want to see a committee set back up so we can have a serious conversation with Helen about some of these missing bus routes and making sure that we have a proper democratic process. Because how it happened before... Do
you want to make it a question, Dave?
Yeah. Will you reset up the committee so that we can have democratic input with passengers, with Bristol, working in partnership with WECA? Because I think that's desperately needed.
I think what's happening at the moment is that as part of the enhanced partnership, WECA will be setting up a bus user forum, and so I think that's progress because we heard the calls for that. So there will be a bus user forum being started by WECA, and I think that's the appropriate place to put it. And I'm sure that's something that you've already lobbied for. So hopefully you'll be pleased, and I trust that you'll be writing to WECA with the same question to ask about the arrangements for that. Okay, I am going to move us on now. Thank you to the members of the public. You're more than welcome to stay if you want to see the rest of the. More than welcome to stay if you want to see the rest of the committee, but you're also more than welcome to leave. Right, agenda item 7. The purpose of this report. The purpose of this report is to note arrangements for the Transport and Connectivity Policy Committee for the municipal year. This report is for information only. And just to note that an updated report was published, I think, today.
No, it's day after publication.
Day after publication, as a supplement to the main reports pack with updated committee membership after ratification by full council. Sam, would you like to outline the report?
Thank you, Chair. So as the Chair mentioned, there was an updated report which was published shortly after publication because there's some changes in membership that were then to be presented. So the report is to note The membership of the Transport and Connectivity Policy Committee, there has been 3 changes in membership. Councillor Morris is replaced by Councillor Weston. Councillors Breyer and Wilcox are no longer on the committee, and we welcome Councillors Ralston and Wells. We're noting the appointment of Councillor Plowden as a chair and the note of the appointment of Councillor Rippington as vice chair. The terms of reference are listed as per the Constitution, which is published online and is unchanged from the previous municipal year. And then we're noting we're asking you to note the Transport and Connectivity Policy Committee meeting dates for the municipal year 26 to 27. So it's for noting, for information.
Thanks, Sam. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, no need for a vote. I'm just going to ask the committee to note the report as per the recommendations. Let's go on to agenda item 8. That's capital investment into Bristol City Council highway infrastructure. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to procure and spend capital investment into highways infrastructure using the budget awarded as part of the full council meeting on the 12th of February. This is a key decision report. It involves spend over £500,000 and impacts 2 or more wards. Patsy or Sean, would you like to briefly introduce and outline the report?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for letting me bring this report. It's to, as the Chair stated, it's to agree the spending and contracting of significant maintenance works. We did very well, I believe, as a highways maintenance department from the capital funding of £21,775,000. Otherwise, capital funding would like me. Just to outline what that funding is, there is a table there which sets it out over the next 5 years, but obviously, particularly quite a large spend this financial year. So just to set that out, the annual road maintenance for this year, we have some significant roads which need actually reconstruction, just not resurfacing. So the Grove, Marsh Street, Baldwin Street, Creswick and Dorian Road all need significant work because they're becoming very dangerous and they're key bus routes. Also, there's always been a fund which has always supported the annual programme, so that's encompassed within this funding. And we're hoping to expand the preventative programme going forward, so that means more pre-patch needed this year to prepare the road for preventative for the following year. So that's what that funding is highlighted for. Neff and Lock bridges, one of the bridges through principals inspections has been found to be beyond refurbishment and actually needs placing. Luckily, it's one of those which we can lift out and lift in, so it's actually quite quick works. But one of the bridges on the nearer the canal side, should we say, not the river side, actually needs lifting out and complete replacement. Froome Culvert, because most of the culvert actually runs under the highway, we're the riparian owner of the culvert, and we haven't undertaken inspections of that for quite some period. And we know that things were great, should we say, 10 years ago, and that we need to actually get back in there and look. And obviously that's quite a challenging technical engineering aspect because it's confined spaces and so on. And we're looking at technology to help us do that with drones and submarines to go through and inspect the culvert and do LiDAR surveys and things like that. Repairs of a highway retaining walls and bridge inspections are a very similar thing. It's to actually undertake principal inspections, which mean we actually take chunks out of the structures to see what's actually happening to the steel, to the concrete, and so on. And then that leads on to normally capital works beyond, but obviously we need to do get the evidence and the asset data, because as I've said to new committee members, but as I've said to committee members a number of times, we're very much asset data led and a data led decision on our health and safety responsibilities. Vehicle restraint barriers, obviously vehicle restraint barriers is exactly what it says on the tin. Really important to keep people on the road at very dangerous locations where there could be embankments, approaches to bridges, those sorts of things, and we have identified a number of sites throughout the city which are actually in very much need of repair. So that funding is there to repair and keep people safe on the network. Electrical Upgrades, again, that's works which have been identified, which are beyond the funding which we normally apply to lighting, which have identified as called C1 and C2 from C1 and C2 inspections. It's all data-led. It's very much about funding them. We should be doing them within 12 months, and they're already 18 months old, some of these repairs. So this was very much about trying to get the funding in to catch up on those health and safety inspections. Electrical upgrade for Queen Square. Again, I've actually got some information from my electrical team on this because it's they're having to work live on the equipment down there, which again is a health and safety issue, obviously for us. The events electrics are at end of life and actually burning out because they're actually in places which gets ponding and water into. So we need to move them from there. And basically, we're also having to move the lamp posts a lot for events because the events actually bring in over £100,000 a year, the events from Queen Square into the council, and that obviously helps maintain Queen Square for parks and docks and so on. So what we want to do is change the lamp posts so that we can not work on them live and replace them so that they're easily plug in, plug out, if you see what I mean, instead of actually to replace them for the events. What I have checked is that we have been working with WECA in relation to the mobile battery storage because that basically is one of the way we're going forward to try and reduce the generators down for events. What we're doing is actually to supplement that. It's not to remove the battery storage. It will be working together in both, and both are needed. One, for health and safety reason. Two, to help the events happen without causing more funding to remove the lamppost, and also to use battery as part of it. And finally, the ongoing new cut walls, which a lot of committee members will be aware of. This is just for us to carry on. We did have a committee decision last year to provide the funding, but at the time the funding wasn't available. So obviously this was my first ask this year to bring that funding in line so we complete basically the York Road, the Gateway, which we're both working on site at the moment, and there's 3 areas of Coronation Road walls which are in need of urgent works as they're an imminent collapse. Just to confirm, the EQIA has been carried out in accordance, but obviously with highways legislation, we are governed by a lot of legislation in relation to safety of pedestrians around sites and so on. So every single job gets its own health and safety assessments. And just to confirm the recommendations are to approve the allocation of the 21,775,000, authorise the Executive Director in consultation with the committee chair to contract the works, and then to invoke any subsequent extensions if needed up to the budget envelope.
Thank you very much, Sean. Any questions? So I've got, I'm going to take them in order. So that's Toby, Mark, Tim and Nick.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Sean, for the report. I have no particular issue with the funding that's allocated, and I appreciate how much you do to sort of squeeze a lot out of the very tight purse strings, so thanks for that. I have one general request and then one question that's a bit more specific. So the general request is whether particularly the new committee members, but perhaps some of the previous committee members would appreciate a briefing on the overall budgets for your team, Sean, and Adam, I think for your team as well. So if we could arrange that at some point to bring us fully up to speed, that would be very, very helpful. And then my specific question...
So I think I've seen nods, so I think the answer to that is yes.
We'll take that as noted.
And I think actually there was quite a lot of discussion about transport budgets at the full council meeting from which this budget derives, and I think it would be really useful for us to have an update on both the capital and the revenue budget, so we just got a good overview. And I'd also like to just point out that Councillor Renard has arrived, and that's been noted by the clerk. So, Toby.
Thanks, Chair. So the specific question is about the new cut walls. So I go past the York Road section by the Banana Bridge quite regularly, and I can see how complex of an operation that is to repair a very old structure next to a live river without kind of taking the whole thing down and putting it back up again. So I understand this funding is to finish off that work. Then you mentioned another site, the Gateway. Could you just clarify where that is?
That's directly across the river, just up from Joffrey Bridge. We call it the Gateway because the old prison gateway is still there.
Okay.
It's basically directly on the river wall in front of that.
Thank you. And then finally, you mentioned Coronation Road. So those works are included in this budget request, and are we talking works the same kind of scale as what's been done at York Road, or is it lighter, or is it heavier?
As per the previous committee report, it's actually to do the inspections and understand the mode of failures and come up with the solutions. Because whilst we've done Cumberland Road, we've done York Road, we've done the Gateway, we obviously do look to for the most cost-effective way and method, and it all is down to the mode of failure, the type of construction, and then what do we need to do to solve that in the most cost-effective way. So at the moment, the funding, which was as agreed in the last committee report, where we highlighted the need for these works, the team are undertaking the vegetation clearance, the inspections, the structural sort of core in to look into modes of failure, to then understand what so we will be back to say this is what we found, this is the information from the money which has been invested to understand those modes of failure.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Sam, the clerk, has just offered to recirculate that last committee report that Sean mentioned to all of the committee, but obviously particularly for the benefit of new members of this committee who may not have read every word of it. Next up was Mark.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have no issues with the report itself. I've just got a couple of questions on it. I'm more than happy to with the sums. When we talk about bridges, for want of a better term, are we talking about only wet bridges, or is it viaducts in there as well?
It's all structures.
Excellent. So it would include like the St George Road viaduct out there and things?
We're very aware of St George's viaduct. It's actually just had a recent inspection.
I had a good look at it. It looks awful. But yes, okay, fair enough.
I will say it is safe.
Okay. I hate to imagine what unsafe looks like, but okay, fair enough. Yeah, I'm talking about the underneath. I'm sure structurally on top it's fine, but the underneath. When we talk about road maintenance, does this include road markings as well? Or is it simply pouring tarmac?
It
I
is
say simply.
Yeah, it's reconstruction, so it's actually going through all the tarmac layers to the base layers and reconstructing that as well as doing the top. But it's also lining tends to be revenue.
Okay.
So at the moment, to undertake the additional lining we're taking across the city, I am investing the extra CAS funding, which has been attributed to maintenance, to invest in that. We now have 4 crews repairing lining across the entire city.
I'd love one to appear in my patch.
There is a schedule.
And to put that in context, we had 1 crew when we came into this administration in 2024. So we've upped that.
I fully acknowledge that is. I'm aware of the schedule, by the way. I'm not even sure I'm in the top 10, but yeah, okay. And
there's a lot to catch up on.
Yeah, it would appear. The final one, if I may, and this is more of just a plea when it comes to road maintenance. Obviously, residents are very patient, but digging up the roads is problematic. Can we please try and liaise with utilities and other people that seem to just pop up like gophers and then dig up a road after we've relayed it or repaired it? And that seems to happen with monotonous regularity.
Yeah.
I know that's out of your control, per se.
Some of it is out of our control, but any of these new roads where we're investing the money, I can't do it on surface stress roads, but where we're investing some of this money into the road, I actually put what's known as a Section 58, and it prevents utilities going in for 2 years. And we do that on every road we resurface with blacktop because of the investment we put in, and that is part and parcel of we do it. We do coordinate with utilities. An example would be Councillor Reynolds at Victorian Road, which has been quite controversial because they've delayed, and we've been waiting because we didn't want to go in and do our new road surface, and then the gas board come along and dig it up, which we knew they were going to go and have to do. So that liaison does go, and sometimes even our top priorities have to wait. And should we say my reactive maintenance side, where they go in and patch and do the potholes, or going, Sean, we really need this road done, and I'm going, yeah, but Bristol Water are going in or Wells and West are going in, we need to hold, because I'm not about to spend 20, 30, 40,000 pound on that junction and for it to then be trenched up, because publicly it would look awful and local councillors would rightly be saying, Sean, what the hell's going on?
And I think we underestimate just how much of that work goes on, and I'd like to thank Sean. So I put it on the record, thanks to Sean, just how much work goes on to do that coordination. And I have to be very careful what I say here, but we work as best we can with the utilities who have their own pressures.
I acknowledge that, Chair, and I would say this is one of those scenarios where all, should we say, failures are public and successes are private. So we only hear about it when it goes wrong.
And I'd also like to thank Tom for his relentless pursuit of Dorian Road. And it may be a bit of a case over the next couple of months to be careful what you wish for, because obviously the traffic management will be going in. And we do everything we can to minimise the disruption, but it's inevitable when you're maintaining things on a live network that there's a certain amount of disruption. Sean, you wanted to...
Not necessarily that, because that will happen, and I'm sure we will work with local councillors to try and minimise and make sure the communication's out there. But in relation to Councillor Weston's point, I just wanted to actually raise a good example, which was one of the successes we had last year. We worked with all utilities. We closed West Street in Bedminster for 3 days, got all utilities to come in and do their Section 81 covers and frames and covers. We went in ourselves and done some patching and some repairs. It would have meant, if they did it individually, it would have been 24 days of road closures and intervention. We did it in 3. So we do, and that was a good example of what I would say is the Cosgrove effort. And we are actually we're endeavouring to do more of that, and are working with actively working with utilities in locations where we can see those benefits.
Who is next? Tim.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Sean, Netham Lock. We all know that junction down there is very archaic and not very sensible in the modern world. But I think my understanding is that as part of Temple Quarter Phase 2 development, they're looking to that will eventually get redeveloped completely. So is this just a sort of stopgap to make sure that those bridges are safe until such time as the redevelopment of that junction comes along? And just to add to that, you've obviously right next to that, you've got the new Brislington Bridge, which I know has been looked at recently. Do we have any idea on the sort of longevity of that particular structure?
So the investment for any new bridges through there is 10 years away. The bridge as it stands will not last that long. At the end of the feeder, it does need replacing. New Brislington Bridge, you're absolutely right, Councillor, it is in need of replacement. It is certainly on our strategic view. We have been talking to WECA colleagues and so on about how we could take that forward, whether Temple Quarter could contribute. And me and Adam have had a number of conversations, should we say, about how do we deal with that in the future, because that bridge, the reason the concrete blocks are on it is to actually protect it from any vehicle intrusion, because we would then have to close it. So we're at the moment, we've done, last year we spent £1 million doing carbon fibre repairs, because the reinforcing steel had got to a stage where it was not suitable. So we've put some strength back into the bridge. But yes, it is now 125 years old, when a concrete bridge should last only 100 years. So we've already sweated that asset, should we say, and we're very conscious about it, and we are working towards what we can do to replace it, and it will need replacing at some point. Now, whether that includes those other 2 bridges, whether it's just that bridge, is yet to be designed and considered.
So the money that's in this budget for the Netham Lock bridges, how long does that buy you for those structures, roughly?
That should take us to the time of where we will need to be replacing New Brislington Bridge, and whether or not, like I said, those 2 bridges come into that context of that wider scheme or not. There's also the Avonside flood around there. So obviously what we're talking is we're trying to bring everything together, if you saw, as you would expect us to.
Because the lock gates need doing as well.
Because the lock gates, and we're working with harbours, and we've even got the traffic signals are beyond repair at the moment, and the traffic signal scheme is about to happen at the end of the feeder as well. But that will give us those assets to time to the next 10, 15 years when the bridge will need to be replaced.
I don't think anyone envies, as I think Toby said, your job of having to prioritise and make some really difficult decisions about prioritising and eking out the budgets. So next, I've got, so at the moment I've got Nick, Tom, and then Emma wanting to come in. So Nick.
Thanks. Well, actually, I'm going to expand on that theme, Ed. Certainly, maintenance is well worth investing in for safety, reduction in noise. It helps with our modal shift to sustainable means. So we welcome the investment, but I also note that investment has gone up every year for each of the last 5 years. But looking in on the local highways maintenance transparency report, which is actually very well presented, our road condition gets worse every year. That we spend more and we get less for our money. But what needs to happen to turn that around?
So, again, for new members, and I don't think you were there, Councillor, at the time, but I've presented life cycle modelling. The investment we're putting in is great. We're using the most efficient preventative maintenance techniques as recommended by government, but the reality is the investment isn't meeting the depreciation. So whilst we're slowing up, and this year actually we managed to steady it, it actually came, if the figures have come in that we've maintained a steady ship. That's quite an achievement, considering that the actual life cycle modelling shows that we should be investing an extra 9 million a year, and I've got 3 million this year. So, yeah, things are progressing. We're using all the techniques we can to prevent it, slow it, what have you. But I'm not going to deny you're not correct. Things are, but that's not unusual across the entire country. And I'm happy for especially new members or revamp the life cycle modelling and come and present it again, maybe at a time which is more convenient, so that I can present actually what we're looking at and what we're seeing. And that life cycle modelling is just not over carriageways, it's footways, it's street lighting, it's structures, and I can show you how we look at across. And then obviously it's my job with my senior team to go, what are the biggest priorities we need to hit, which is why this funding is here today.
And I'm just going to bring Patsy in as well.
Thanks, Chair. We'll cover this in detail when we get to the risk report. This committee has only one risk on the critical risk register that CLB monitor, and it is the ability to maintain our assets across the city, because we don't have enough funding. And when we do this capital bids every year, we've already started on the capital bids for this year. I left my team alone with the spreadsheet, and I came back and I had 73 million on it. So my job is to go back through it and say, my job is to go back through and say, what is the critical of the critical of the critical of the critical? So these are the most critical. So things like Brislington Bridge, if we can sweat that for another couple of years and it's safe, that's not going on the list, because we have things that absolutely must be done. So it is, while it's great we have this investment, it's not enough.
So I'll just pull out, I think the number that Sean gave us was 9 million a year is what it would take to maintain our assets in the way that we'd like to.
That's just carriageways.
Yes. So another 3, 4?
3, 4 is estimated, bridges, and that doesn't include the bridges.
It is a national problem, it's not just something that Bristol's experiencing.
I think it is. I think it's worth saying though that it's not because we're an outlier or anything. We are absolutely in line with pretty much the national picture. I don't know if you want to, it's really good that you read the transparency report, and I don't know if you wanted to say anything about the way that the Department for Transport maybe slightly undersold our red, amber, green rating, Sean.
Yeah, I'm going to try to be careful what I say. Should we say the DFT did that without consultation with highway authorities? We provided the transparency report with no knowledge that they were then going to do a league table. Should we say every authority I'm aware of has pushed back at government? I have actually personally written to the DFT to note my disappointment. One note, the main reason for us is the 2 ambers we received were because we didn't use the condition surveying recommended by DFT, despite me having previous email exchanges with the head of DFT to say, Sean, I understand that that data collection doesn't work for your environment. Please go ahead and do whatever works for Bristol. And then they marked us down because we didn't use that criteria. That has been raised. I've been on a national working group it's called PAS 2161, which is basically changing it so that more other technologies can be used. And I would say the technology we now use in Bristol is used by 70 authorities across the country because it has been seen to do the job better. It doesn't give us better results, it gives us more accurate results. And I even sent proof to the DFT showing because when we changed from one to another, we ran both side by side for a year to check, to make sure we were doing the right thing. And I showed them the results of what the one which they were recommended nationally and the one we were doing, and then the Google image of that road to say, they told me this road was red, the new one I want to use is telling me it's green, and this is the Google image which shows it's green, and vice versa. This one was telling me it was okay, this one was telling me it was red, and here's a Google image which clearly shows it should be red and it should be highlighted to us. So I provided all that evidence to DFT. So yes, I was disappointed. I was pleased that we obviously come in amber, which was mid-range, because otherwise I think I would have lost a month of my working life. But the reality being, with the new PAS 2161 coming into play this year, that removes that you have to use this type of technology, and I'm hopeful that our scores will increase, because we are seen, and I will take and be quite modest about this, we are actually seen as quite a forward-thinking authority. Others around the southwest actually say, Sean, what are you doing? Because they think, oh, we'll do that, and that's places like other cities like Plymouth and other places, Bath and so on around the southwest.
And I'm going to add one more thing, which is the budgets for adopted roads are based on a kind of square yardage of road or square meterage of road plus a supplement for structures. Length of meter. It makes no allowance for how hard-working that road is. And we feel very strongly that that's not a very fair way of doing things, because the kind of strain put on our roads of particularly heavy vehicles stopping and starting, which is a feature of being in an urban environment, puts a lot more stress on our roads, and we don't think that that sort of very blunt funding allocation is the right way to go about it.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so just to put that in context, places, rural authorities get exactly the same per length of road for a country lane which takes a tractor a day or a few cars a day, as I do for a residential street in Bristol.
Or indeed
the A4, the A4 coming into Bristol. Yeah, the A37, the A4 coming into Bristol, A38, which obviously causes us, as an urban authority, quite a strain. Because we got footways and everything else, which is not, it doesn't alter the funding mechanism.
Let's get back to the questions. Tom.
Just brief, because obviously it's really important we get this money spent and get the work done. I just want to come back on Filton Road, Dorian Road junction, which I think I've been raising for over 3 years. So I am pleased, thank you for finally getting it sorted. It just strikes me that perhaps we just need to think about escalation process with the utilities company and whether that can happen quicker sometimes going forward. But, you know, I'm pleased it is now sorted. I'm pleased that, well, I don't think residents will be broadly very happy for 11 days from next week, so the road's got to be shut. But we know that the end result will, once it's also been resurfaced in the summer, will be good. But can we just make sure councillors are kept regularly updated as we go through these next few months? And I think let's just make sure we go all the way up to the bus stop at least. And the reason I raised that is because I was talking to businesses recently, and a cyclist came off their bike because there's quite a bad depression that's now emerged if you're going up the A38. You go look at that bus stop, it is horrendous. I can send you photos. Yeah, that was my main comment.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, Councillor Renard, I am very aware, obviously, of this location and the ideal. As I said previously, we certainly wanted Wales and West. Wales and West have got a 2030 target to replace all steel mains by government. It's a directive which has come from government, so we needed to make sure that they come in. if you would like, I'm not sure where the team is with their plan of surfacing, but as soon as that is available, and I will check with the team when I see them next week, because I'm actually off tomorrow, but when I see the team next week, I will ask them if it's ready, or as soon as it's ready, to forward it to yourself and local councillors to show what is the intention in that area. So if you have any further comments on it, and please send the photos, because if it is bad, then we will certainly try to pick it up whilst we're there.
Thank you, that would be great. And then just one final quick point, just back to the whole this, being a national issue. I was striking how much the pothole backlog goes up every year. I think we're up to £18.6 billion now as a backlog. I was reading in the news a couple of months ago. So, it's clearly very challenging.
And just to be clear, I have asked that all ward councillors get the information they need to give to their residents, because I think we're all in it together, and the more that we can get that information out proactively, the less it is that we have, raising casework and people have to respond. So the more that we can all be part of that communication solution, the better. I'm going to move on to Emma, and I've got Kaz, and then after that we're going to move on to the next item.
Thank you. Two things. One's very quick, which was we're talking about the bridges. Last year we went and had a look at all of the bridges, and there's been quite a few changes to the committee now, and it looks like a lot of the work's progressed, especially along the cut. So would we be able to go and have a look again, because that would be really useful. I'm a visual learner, so it helps for me to see these things.
Would be a pleasure.
Great.
I'm more than happy to invite really to come and see Vauxhall, because 80% of the bridge has now been replaced, which is incredible. So yeah, more than happy. And to, like I said, just for new members, I don't just show you the good stuff, I actually show you the horror stories as well.
If anyone's interested in engineering, it's a really good afternoon out, and I fully recommend it, and I'll try and join you again this time. Emma.
So that was just one little ask. Also, this is also a little bit for the benefit of new members. I remember when this committee first started, and there was something about, I think it was the Lloyd's Amphitheatre electrics were being replaced, and I was like, I didn't even know that was transport, and it obviously was, and now you're doing Queen Square. So just wondering, with those electric supplies, is this part of a programme, or is it a case of as they need doing, they're being done? Is this like a standard that we're looking for the whole of Bristol? Because there's obviously quite a lot of event spaces. Yeah, I'm sort of looking at Patsy, because I'm thinking you're going to answer this. Yeah, is this something you're planning sort of to roll out across all different event spaces in Bristol?
So it all depends on the priorities. So Sean has already, on the bid list for this year, put ducts, electrical assets. It all depends what makes the final cut, because as I say, we have to go through it and say what's the most critical of the critical. So
Sure.
If it's health and safety, we have a scoring system. 4 out of 4 is, the most serious defaults that we have to fix, and everything has to be a 4 out of 4 to get funding, because the list is so long.
Sure.
But yes, that's the plan, and we do look at it every year, but then we have to chip it down.
Right. So every time it's maintained, that's a chance then for you to upgrade.
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just to say, as with all my teams where we've come to with this list, I've actually spoken to the electrical and the events team and said, okay, look, we've done amphitheatre, we're now hopefully going to be doing Queen Square if this funding is approved. What is the next, and how does it look, and how is the safety risk in that? So that, as said, I can look at it in a holistic way. Where are the health and safety? So when I go to Patsy, I can say, these are the actual highest health and safety risks across the city.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Right, last but not least, Kaz.
Thanks, Ed, and thank you, Sean. Really appreciate this report and all you've said and all you do. I mean, all this work is really essential. And I have seen people out doing white lining. It's really good to see that you're actually delivering on those kind of commitments. Just an observation that I think we once talked about some zebra crossing and fish ponds, and I think you got that done on the day it was mentioned, which is great. But I'm a bit concerned that we have sort of people who are shouting very loud for example, 20-mile-an-hour signs, and suddenly it kind of gets done. So one of my questions is about priorities and how you sort of, is it just a question of sort of shouting loud to get things done? And the other one is on surface dressing. I see in the yellow signs going up for surface dressing, which I kind of understand is preventative maintenance. But kind of make an observation that you might have a road that's scheduled for preventive maintenance, and yet just nearby there might be a main road that's in quite a bad state. So how do you prioritise sort of main roads, and how do we explain this to residents, going back to what Ed said, in terms of trying to holding this together to explain to the people that are interested in these things?
So, thank you, Councillor. The zebra in fish ponds was actually on the list to be done. Then we cancelled it because we were told that there was a bigger, wider community scheme happening. So my team then cancelled it, only to find out that actually the zebra was staying as part of the wider community scheme. And so we were like, well, we should get on and do it then. So it wasn't because they were shouting, it was actually on the list to be done, and we initially cancelled it because we tried to work thinking that we don't want to duplicate works or do works which then get changed. In relation to the signs, that's been an ongoing issue. The cost was quite low to replace the signs. I asked the team how bad are they, because actually 20-mile-an-hour repeater signs are under the new guidance are not actually required. But I appreciated the political, it's been brought up a few times, and I do need to recognise that as head of highways as well, that it's not just literally always about the data. It could be what citizens who we're working for actually feel as priorities. So that does get taken into account when we're assessing not just health and safety, what are people really concerned about. So it was a very small amount of money. It was £3,000 to be honest. So to me, in our budgets, and that's something which we could do, which would actually remove that noise for you, for councillors, remove that noise for my officers as well, for very small sum, to be perfectly honest. In relation to surface dressing, absolutely understand where it comes from, because it's very difficult for a member of the public to understand why are we doing that road and we're not doing that road. The reality is we undertake a full assessment of the roads every single year. There's a prioritisation of criteria. Asset condition is obviously high weighting, but there's other weighting such as potholes, complaints. Is it on a school route? Is it near a hospital? Is it all that feeds into the prioritised weighting? We get two lists, a resurfacing list and a surface dressing list. With resurfacing, it's really expensive. It's very environmentally unfriendly. So I swept that asset to within an inch of its life, to be honest with you. You know, but there are certain places, because we cannot do preventative on mini roundabouts, main roads by shops, we don't like to do it. So there are certain locations we will always try to do preventative and get there first. But as Councillor Coombs said, we're going backwards, so we're getting there a little bit late. I wish we could get there a little bit earlier, and if I had the funding which was needed, we would get there earlier. And I think in the life cycle modelling, I showed that we're actually working here when we should be working here, if you see what I mean, on a pie chart. So yes, I understand, and it's very difficult. And we do have why do we surface stress, which we can give to residents who come to us, and I'm more than happy to share it with committee members, because it actually sets out why do you do preventative maintenance. And the analogy I always use is painting a windowsill. If you paint and look after a windowsill, it'll last you a lifetime. If you don't, it'll crack and rot. And that's exactly what preventative maintenance is all about. So surface dressing the roads, slurry sealing the footways, all that is about maintaining and looking after that infrastructure, which you need to do at a certain time. Otherwise, it goes beyond the rots, and then it costs you a lot more money environmentally and in budget.
There's a one-page explanation, isn't there, of why surface dressing is
why
really good. It might be a good idea if we circulated that around
happy for that to
the
be
councillors
Chair.
again. Thank you. So I'm going to move the recommendation that the Committee for Transport Connectivity approves the spend of the full allocation as set out in Table 1, authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration in consultation with me to procure and award the various contracts and all the, through basically framework that we have in place and in line with the maximum budget envelopes, and to all the usual delegations. So would anyone like to second that? I'm going to pick on Tim today as the Vice Chair. It's apparently, I never knew until today that it's convention that the Vice Chair seconds all these things. So for today, we're thank you, Tim. Can I see a show of hands in favour? Yes, well, just for today, we're going to work with convention. So can I see a show of hands for, that's carried unanimously, so I'm not going to read out all the individual votes. Okay. Would anyone like a break now, or should we do the next item and have a break? I'm happy either way. Let's do the next item. And okay, so the next item is agenda item 9, Cribs Patchway New Neighbourhood funding. And the purpose of this report is, well, I think it's on the screen, isn't it? No, not quite yet. Basically to get the Section 106 funding related to CPNN from South Gloucestershire and start to use it. Would you like to take us through the key elements of the report quite, maybe a good trot, Adam?
Yeah, sure. So we're talking about a Section 106 allocation from CPNN. This was agreed back in 2013-14, but I think was formally signed off in about 2018. So that 2.875 million is index linked and will be higher than 2.875 million once that index linking is worked out. So the request is to accept and draw down £250,000 of that money to fund design development for new projects in the area to meet the requirements of the Section 106 agreement, and then to accept and draw down £488,000 to fund the delivery of the work package 4 from the A37A418 scheme, which is a series of dropped curbs and related improvements, and then award contracts for that project. So there's a copy in there of the agreement, what was agreed in the Section 106 agreement. I would say that was agreed a very long time ago. So whatever we do, we'll go to the CPNN steering group to get agreement. This gives us a general indication of what we need to be looking to spend it on. But I think we can be confident we've got a fair degree of flexibility in how we use the funding as long as it's within that area and mitigating the impacts of CPNN. It's managed by South Gloucestershire, so we have to apply to them for the funding. We've produced a map further down that sets out the sort of area that we'd look at for the wider schemes that we'd like to develop. I don't think that's a hard boundary. We've marked on there the roads that are highlighted in the Section 106 agreement. We've drawn a kind of boundary around it to give an idea of the sort of area we think we should be designing schemes in. We also included in that the A37A418 work package 4 works. And what we would do with the £250,000 is start developing schemes with stakeholders, councillor input, etc., to get an understanding of what people are keen to see. So going on to the recommendations then, it is to authorise the Exec Director to basically apply to South Gloucestershire for the 2.875 million, and then also to authorise the Exec Director to accept and draw down £250,000 for the design development, and then to accept and draw down the 488k for delivery of work package 4, and to procure and award contracts for that amount for work package 4. And finally, to invoke any subsequent extensions and variations.
And I think it's worth noting in recommendation to a further report will be brought to this committee to approve delivery of the design. So this is we need to get it going and to get the money in the bank, but not actually not seeking over delegation here. I imagine there's a number of questions about this. I've got one question, which is I think they're planning a second stage of development to go from something in the region of 5,000 houses to about 20,000 dwellings. Is that right? And if so, presumably there's another tranche of Section 106 that will be coming. And I just want to make sure that any designs we bring forward may be future-proofed and maybe even quite ambitious in their scope, anticipating that there's going to be further Section 106 coming from as the whole airfield site gets built out.
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen whether we would get additional funding from that. That's a discussion for ourselves and South Gloucestershire, depending on how that all plays out. I think it would certainly make sense with the design development money to develop a wide package of schemes, and then you can prioritise the ones you want to deliver, and then you've kind of got something on the shelf that can be delivered if other funding does come along. So I think that would make sense, certainly.
It might even help make the case for further funding as part of that negotiation and planning process. Thank you. So, Kaz, your hand went up very quickly. I've got Kaz, Mark, Nick, Emma, Toby.
Thanks. Yeah, I have no problems with this. Obviously, I think we're going to see more pressure on the A38 and the B4056, especially with Southmead Hospital having to serve the Cribs neighbourhood area. The drops, curbs, it sort of fits in with the golden motion to make Bristol the most accessible city, which we in the Labour Party managed to get passed. On drop curbs, I think I might have said this before, they do work well when you've got good drainage nearby and don't have big puddles. So it's just an observation. But obviously, I'm a Southmead councillor, so on Southmead Road, I think there are several things that could be looked at. Got sort of working the way down from top to bottom, the double mini roundabout. Just this week, I had a query about the Shetland Road junction and how that is quite problematic for pedestrians, particularly people who go to school, at the Orchard School. The hospital exit's always problematic. Maybe some bus priority traffic lights on Doncaster Road. And then there's number 2 bus route proposals, which I'm discussing with a council officer tomorrow. And possibly even the pedestrian crossing down on near Lake Road, which I think might have been part of the number 2 bus route. So I'm open to any discussions with council officers on these and developing some plans. My question is, we've got some projects going forward on the area committee process, and I just, how do we sort of shoe all this together? I'm just concerned, you know, when the different transport departments might be working on different things. We need to sort of bring it all together as one package, not, yeah.
Yeah, so the area committee schemes will be led by the local transport team. This project will be led by the local transport team as well. We'll probably appoint a project manager from the transport delivery team, but they'll work with local transport as the client. You know, if there are existing area committee schemes that, you know, might benefit from being expanded, then that would be quite a good use of the funding, I would suggest. You know, probably we could spend this money several times over. So we'll have to have a little bit of thought to being realistic about what we can deliver. I think, you know, things that do link to other schemes could be seen as a benefit. Then also you might find all the funding going in one area, which you might want to do as well, might not want to do as well. So I think, you know, the first thing to do is go out and get people's views on the sort of projects that they're interested in seeing and you know, recognising they do need to mitigate the impacts of CPNN. You know, and some could be more expensive than others, and there'll be different impacts that we want to mitigate. But it will be the same teams doing the work, so there will be that link up between them. And just to point out, we're very aware of the kind of desire of councillors to get all the area committee schemes delivered. I know there's been a long backlog for a period of time, so we're seeking to draw this money down, and we'll start doing some design work, but we have to focus on what's already in train as well and make sure that gets delivered before we can allocate resource. We are just going out to recruit additional resource into that team at the moment, but just to flag, this will be following on, if you like.
And I think what's really nice is to hear that you're in direct contact with the project manager and that you will be able to take some sort of overview as well, so that if you feel that there's opportunities to join things up, I hope you'll make sure that you feed that back in and we're listening to that. And certainly would want to hear if you feel that's not happening well. So I'm really open to feedback. So on to Mark.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got no real issue with this package in and of itself. I think it's a nice to have. It's not particularly revolutionary considering the scale of the housing development coming down the road to us, literally, or the rail, however you want to propose it. Yeah, quite. My nervousness is more with the CPNN as a whole, and it relates to what you're saying. If they are going to ratchet up the number of houses, most of the mitigation we're hearing none of that money seems to flow south. And one of the problems that we invariably have in our patch is that we've only ever looked at the major corridors, really, when we're looking at traffic, and traffic will spill. It will flow. It won't vanish. So I would make a pitch as we are going down this, if additional monies come along, then if they're coming down the A4018 or they're coming down Southmead Road or whatever else, please work with us as local councillors as to where that traffic will deflect to, because we live with it. And I'm not talking about stuffing it up and blocking it or doing a North Bristol livable neighbourhood. Chair, stop smiling. Stop smiling. Not a chance. But for example, there are points, for example, if you look down the A418 when traffic flows down there, the traffic then deflects down Crow Lane And what we actually should be doing is improving the Crow Lane, Henbury Road junction at the end to improve traffic flow. But we never look at that. We only ever look at the main corridor. So my plea really is to do that. And also, and I'll say this every time it comes to the CPNN, most of this is in South Gloss, and that is within South Gloss's remit to sort of do. We are the junior player there. As part of the decisions taken semi-recently, we're going to have the arena in North Bristol, which is actually in our patch. And I've still yet to really hear the parking mitigation package that goes with that for what will happen in Upper Brentry around that. We know there's money there, but I've yet to see it. So fine with this, absolutely. But I'd love to know a bit more about what we're going to do, especially if the arena goes to 20,000. That makes me very nervous. Me particularly, but it also spills into Kaz's patch as well. With that, I'm going to vote for this. Of course I am, Chair, but I do have a few little concerns going forward.
That was the arena going from 17,000 to 20,000. So it'd be interesting to hear any views of that.
Yes, I mean, we still have the funding and Section 106 allocated from the arena. I think it's fair to say it was put on the back burner for a period of time whilst the development wasn't progressing because we've got a lot of pressures and other things to do. So some of the schemes have developed a bit further than others. We have just appointed a project manager to pick up the remaining kind of mitigation schemes, which include the parking controls, and we will be re-engaging on that project and kind of restarting it again.
Chair, if I might then make a little plea for Henbury Brentry and Southmead councillors, when you're re-engaging on that particular parking issue, could we maybe have a Teams call and a briefing on that and throw in our 2 cents? Don't need to worry about Hawkfield, it's fine. And Hawkfield.
I'm all for collaboration and for officers involving members as and when necessary, and I think something as enormous as some of the developments we're talking about here it really does require us to work together across members and officers. So next up is Nick.
Thank you. You might not have spotted that there was a public statement from the Westbury-on-Trim Society in today's pack talking about this topic, and they drew attention to the fact that the new neighbourhood stretches from the A4018 to the A37, but all of the A38, but the emphasis seems to be on mitigating the A38 Gloucester Road, not the 4018, which is Falkendale Road in our patch. Have they missed something? Is there a separate Section 106 for the 4018, or should we be considering this single one for both corridors?
So there was a separate Section 106 for the 4018. That's delivering the scheme that is being delivered at the moment along from Crow Lane roundabout southbound. We would like to take that scheme further, or a variation of that scheme further. So, it's all right. Don't worry. But yeah, so that Section 106 has been allocated to that project. This Section 106 it is. I wouldn't say it focuses on the A38. I think the wording is wide enough that we can position it where we want to position it. Although I would say, to do a scheme further down the A4018, I think probably needs TCR funding if you look at the scale of what that might require. So we have highlighted those sort of corridors as needing works done to them. I think probably TCR is where that would come from, but there is this funding here that could be utilised around the Westbury-on-Trim area as well.
So if I could play that back, and the response to the Westbury-on-Trim Society is that there was a Section 106. It's already been spent on what's happening on Passage Road and Crow Lane. There's no more money. That's all they're getting.
From that Section 106, this Section 106 could apply to that area. That can be part of the discussion, certainly.
I did read that statement, and it has a lot of history, which I struggled to understand from the statement itself. So I have actually taken a copy of that statement, emailed it to myself, and so that I can just get up to speed with exactly the history and where we are and where we're going. So it is something I have taken note of.
It might just be worth me saying that at the time those schemes were first discussed, the idea was to come a lot further down. but the cost of it was much higher than what was available from the Section 106. So we've kind of started at the closest point with the aim to come further down when additional funding becomes available. But we need to get to that additional funding.
And that's why I'm very keen that if we're doing this work, we've got some idea of what the future might bring. So we've got a better evidence base to get the Section 106 from any future proposals to the north of Bristol. I'm going to go to Emma next.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Probably, I think Toby's question's a bit similar to mine, so I'll let him jump in if he wants to. Absolutely no problem with this. All looks fine. Obviously, there's like a bit of the Gloucester Road and improvement with cycling on that corridor. I'm getting a bit frustrated with the notion of a corridor when things get done so piecemeal. I mean, I know we've spoken before about Gloucester Road as a cycling corridor, and that there isn't any plans for when it actually is more sort of Gloucester Road down. It is a massive cycling corridor, and it's so piecemeal. There are some bits that are great, some bits that are absolutely horrific. There are people who won't cycle down the Gloucester Road because it doesn't feel safe enough. And I'm just wondering, is there any chance that we can do a more joined up approach of treating the A38 Gloucester Road actually all the way down to Stokescroft more of a corridor? And is this approach going to hinder that if we're just waiting for like little drib drabs of funding here, there and everywhere?
So I think there's a few kind of strands to how to respond to that. The A38, I would say, has been kind of set on one side because we've been talking about mass transit for a long time along essentially that alignment. So there hasn't been a push to go and do lots of bus priority and active travel scheme like we might do a long corridor scheme, because you don't want to do something that then you do something completely different, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
I think we need to probably review that approach because we can't wait forever to improve the A38. So, you know, we will be discussing mass transit options with the combined authority, and I think as part of that we do need to be looking at the kind of short to medium term future of the A38. Again, it's a corridor we've highlighted as needing investment. In terms of what can be done, that's kind of more of a 10 to 20, 30 million pound scheme depending on the length of the corridor. So it's not going to be sort of the most appropriate for this sort of funding. I don't think this sort of funding harms that sort of scheme, but it's a different sort of scheme and a different type of funding that you need for it, I would suggest. So I would focus this funding on the areas between, because we don't often get a great deal of money for local changes.
Yeah.
Although it's quite difficult, it's kind of easier to get big corridor package money from the way the DfT structures funding.
In terms of the geography of it, though, is it going to be more like we've got funding? I can see this is very geographical. It's an area, like we're doing things in this area. If it is a case of piecemeal funding, which I totally understand, you don't get those big chunks of money very often, would there be a way of maybe just like instead looking at those pinch points, those like bits of where cycling is impossible or cycling is really dangerous, and sort of focus the money on those areas rather than just say, oh, well, we'll do really great cycle lanes for this chunk and then that chunk. That's what, yeah, if you want to come in on that, you're more than welcome. Rather than, you know, sort of looking at the problem spots so that there is a kind of a better flow overall. Yeah,
I mean, I think, as I say, we're going to have some discussions either way with the Combined Authority about the A38 because we're talking to them about it from a mass transit perspective. If we look at doing a kind of short to medium term scheme, then it probably does need to be a sort of light touch, find the problem spots and improve them, because, you know, being realistic, the A38 is very narrow in certain parts, and having a segregated cycle corridor all the way down the A38 is probably not going to be feasible unless, you know, you want to completely take traffic out of the road, which also doesn't feel very feasible at the moment. So, yeah, I support that sort of approach. We need to get into a position through the TCR process, I would suggest, of being able to have that discussion with the combined authority. They're going to, I think, come to us with, here are the pinch points on the active travel network, here are the pinch points on the public transport network, what can we do about them? And that's where we could feed into that process. But we're still waiting for updates from the combined authority about exactly how that process is going to work to determine where TCR funding goes.
Great, thank you.
What I've heard today from the combined authorities, they're seeing TCR as more of an ongoing programme rather than something that we're going to absolutely set in stone at the beginning and adhere rigidly to it. So that gives us the opportunity to maybe exert some influence on that. Toby.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, it's kind of following on from what Emma said. I cycle the full length of Gloucester Road more or less every single day, so I'll be very glad when Dorian Road is resurfaced, because I feel that pain. And so Emma's talked about the Bristol end and having some consistency along there. I'd like to talk about the other end. Once you cross the South Gloss border, the nature of that road changes in a few steps, but quite rapidly into something that's much more intimidating, much more scary for cyclists. Yet it is still the cycling desire line, and that cycling corridor does continue down, towards where Brabazon is. So my question is whether we have strategic alignment with South Gloss about the nature of the corridors and what infrastructure they're going to put in. Because I know they've put in measures past the ring road once you get past sort of Airbus at the top of the hill, but there's still that gap to the Bristol border that's not really covered in any way.
Yeah, so my understanding of the process that the Combined Authority are bringing forward for TCR is they will be doing an analysis of gaps in the network in a more kind of strategic way, which I think is a positive thing. I would say with CRSTS, it was more the authorities bringing forward the schemes that they thought were most necessary. I think the Combined Authority taking a more strategic view and saying this is where we think the issues are on key strategic corridors is a positive step. So hopefully it will identify that, and that will be a good test of this process to see if it does identify the things that we think are gaps in the network. And that will then, I suppose, give the Combined Authority more opportunity to say to us or to South Gloss, you need to fill that gap in. It's a challenging road the further up you get, certainly, but also it's a wider road the further up you get, and then there is more space to do stuff, so there is opportunities there. And whilst I say we're not going to get a segregated cycle route all the way down the A38, that doesn't mean we shouldn't get it on significant sections of it and then be feeding into things like Concord Way and other kind of quieter routes that might be achievable as well.
And just as a final point on that, I think once you start to get in those sections, then the case for filling in the gaps between the sections becomes ever more obvious, and perhaps they become more palatable. Because I think if there's one corridor in the city that we should be really, really bold for cycling, it is the Gloucester Road.
Yeah, I think, Baldwin Street is a really good example of that, where a chunk got built, no one thought we could get it all the way along, and we have done eventually. So, we can get that.
I think there's examples of that all over the place, where we've had to take an incremental approach, and you can't boil the ocean, you have to do it piece by piece. Tom, last comments, questions?
As you'd imagine, as one of the Hawford Ward Councils, I really welcome this funding coming forward, and we're voting to support it. Today, I think, as other councils are raised, you need to think about, the increase in housing, the increase, potentially in arena capacity and things like that, and the mitigations that are going to need to be put in place. And 2.8 million sounds like a lot, but it doesn't go very far. And when we think about this money being agreed, 10 plus years ago, and some of the timelines that are here, doing all that we can, I think, to try and get a bit more funding to make sure we can do even more of the things that we want to do to mitigate some of the pressures that we're going to get from that will be really crucial. I think from our perspective, and certainly from Hawford perspective, the way the engagement is done, I think what I'd really encourage is that councillors are engaged every step of the way. There's no need to duplicate what's already been done. A lot of work's been done by ward councillors to engage on local transport priorities. So let's make sure what we do is complement, not duplicate. And to that end, as you'll be aware, I've got several schemes in this year into the area committee process, which there isn't going to be the money to fund from that pot, but many of which may be suitable here, including improving cycling along the section of the A38 in the wards, addressing issues on Monks Park Avenue, Wessex Avenue, Dorian Road, and also Bishop's Thorpe Road. I think we need to think about the hospital as well, and more people are going to be travelling into that hospital as well, and make sure we think about all the roads around the hospital will be really crucial from our perspective, as well as probably looking at Toronto Road if we have got some spare cash to deal with that, because cars fly up and down there and it gets can get really dangerous. So really welcome this funding. I'm looking forward to working with you and the team to look at how these schemes are taken forward, and let's hope we can crack on. Thank you.
And I think the comment I would make is we need to sweat this money as much as we can. We have got interest. Section 106 does accrue interest, so it will be, I think, a large amount of money. And but I think also we need to have a long-term vision, and but prioritise in the short term. So we try and get the best of both worlds. I'm going to move this now. So we seek approval to apply to South Gloucestershire, get the money, and then actually use it to fund development. And then we also accept and draw down the money as part of that total to do work package 4 and all the usual delegations. Would anyone like to second that? Oh, Tom, you got in even before Tim. So Tom, seconded by Tom, and show of hands in favour. That's everyone other than Nick. And everyone against it? Nick? I'm sorry? I didn't hear that, Nick. Would you like to just say that into the microphone?
Yeah, spending a fifth of the allocation onto a project before you've written the strategic plan about how to allocate the money is a really bad way of scheduling your work. Okay, noted. And I'm going to propose a break. What's the time now? It's 18:46. Is everyone all right with a 9-minute break? Come back here at 5:02. Okay.
So agenda item 10, the Healthy Streets Approach adoption. The purpose of this is to start using the Healthy Streets approach in a nutshell, and I'm going to ask Adam to introduce this report.
It's quite a comprehensive report, so I'm not going to go through it, all of it. In summary, the Healthy Streets approach is, in essence, a way of assessing certain factors in a street, if you like, and then assessing what those factors look like after we've proposed a scheme and what the impact of that scheme is on those factors, with a focus on improving health in transport and in streets. So there's a number of tools and resources that are used, a design check evaluation framework on street assessments, new development checklists and training. Why do we need them? Well, the current design of our streets has a significant health impact, and that is measurable, and that is a cost, a lot of which is borne by the NHS, but also a wider cost to society. And what is evidenced also is that the levels of walking, wheeling and cycling in the city saves a significant amount of that cost, and the more we increase that, the more funding we'll save for the NHS and for the wider impact on the city. So having healthier streets has much wider benefits across lots of different parts of the economy. So it also fights transport and health inequality. Basically fewer people who are disabled walk or wheel 5 times a week than those that are non-disabled. And also those in the most deprived areas are less likely to feel it is convenient and pleasant to walk in their neighbourhood. There's an interesting article in the newspaper today setting out where a lot of more deprived areas lack street trees, and that has a significant impact on people's health, and it's a similar sort of issue. So we've got support from the Bristol City Council Public Health team. We often say to them, transport schemes can be a very good and effective way of improving people's health, and they've shown that with their support for this scheme. There's a detailed outline which I won't go through in a huge amount of detail. I think the main thing to look at is the kind of circle that shows the different factors that we use to assess the schemes. And what we would do is you kind of draw a polygon which shows you how close to the outside you are, if you like, of all those different factors. You do that before the scheme, and then once you design the scheme, you look at it and say, well, how's that going to change those factors, and how's that going to improve the score? So what that then enables you to do is to assess how effective the changes you're making are for all of these different factors. And I think one of the really good things about this is it slightly takes that focus away from transport and gives you that wider focus of what improving streets can do, particularly around health and people feeling relaxed. I comment to people quite often that during the pandemic, when you're sat at home working, comparing that to cycling 10 minutes into work, personally I felt a lot better mental health doing that because it's a nicer environment, you're getting out into the street. And the idea of this approach is to try and encourage our streets to be designed in a way that will foster better health in lots of different ways. There's a good little example there of Arnside Road in Southmead. I would like to think that the second picture is just good design, is what we're doing. So adopting a healthy streets approach doesn't mean we go out and build lots of specific healthy streets. It means that when we're doing design work on a scheme like Arnside Road, we are encouraging ourselves to look at incorporating as many of those features that make the street more healthy as possible. So there's a few case studies covered in there as well. The proposed applications in Bristol, so I mean it's done quite a lot in London, but also Leicester and Liverpool. In terms of proposed applications, the key thing we'll be doing is using it as part of our QA process. So the QA process is the process we use to assess and develop our schemes and ensure they meet all the required standards and qualities. There'll be a small cost to that. I think we're estimating sort of around about £15,000-20,000 a year. Just to give an indication, mine and Sean's capital budgets last year were 75 million, give or take. So it's a very small amount of the total budget. And it will just be done as part of the process, so it's not going to slow things up or anything like that. The other area then we'd be looking at is assessment and co-development of area committee schemes. So we have the CAS money that is available to area committees to supplement area committee schemes. And what we'll be looking to do is apply a Healthy Streets approach so that that funding is allocated to projects that deliver an improvement according to the Healthy Streets Index, which it kind of have to do anyway because the Clean Air Zone money needs to be spent in ways that is improving air quality and delivering against the aims of the Clean Air Zone. So we think that's a useful tool to use for area committees as well. Obviously, we'll integrate it with upcoming policies and plans, and it will help our TDM colleagues to influence developer designs as well. The supplementary one I just wanted to focus on was transport engagement. This approach is quite visual and it's a little bit different maybe to how we engage on transport projects at the moment. And I think it will help to explain to people what we're doing and the different benefits of the scheme and why the scheme looks the way it does and how it's influencing the neighbourhood that they live in. So I think that will be a real strong benefit of the proposal as well. So we'll do some follow-ups to committee in 2027 and 2028 to kind of update on how the approach is going. And the recommendations, in essence, are to approve the adoption of the Healthy Streets approach and to approve the small amount of additional capital recharge required for carrying out the assessments.
And I'd just like to add to that I think this really helps us to think of our streets as streets rather than roads, which I think is a kind of bit of a linguistic distinction, and that I'm really proud that when we think of prevention being at the heart of our strategy, we often think about it as people and trying to prevent them getting into worse and vulnerable people getting into more difficult situations, but that actually this is an example of prevention running through our whole corporate strategy. And as Adam said, if we can get this right, it helps prevent ill health rather than treating it. So I think this is very much in line with the sort of approach we're trying to take to prevent things before they happen and all the cost efficiencies that brings. So I'm sure people have all got things they'd like to say. Serena, Tim, Toby, Kaz.
Thank you. Yes, a very interesting concepts in that. So just a couple of questions. First is pretty basic. I think the report answers this, but would you say that this is best practice nationally now? So that was my first question.
It's certainly heading that way, yeah. I mean, it's well used by London, it's well established in a lot of places. And I would say, to some extent, it's formalising what we already do with our design processes, but giving you a better way of kind of showing what you're doing through the design process.
That's really encouraging to know. With the public engagement, I like that the sort of more creative approach to it, and certainly the jargon-free approach and the quick surveys that you say can be done in 5 to 10 minutes on a smartphone. Again, this may be covered, but, and apologies if it is, but what happens to those results? So you're getting these quick assessments, on-street assessments. What do you do with those? I've got another question after this, sorry.
So I assume they'll be fed through into the engagement process. I guess in part we're trying to, you can sit behind a desk and assess whether you think a street is healthy or not. But if we can get people that are in the street to do that assessment, that's really good data and really good information as to how they feel the street changes as part of the scheme. Yeah, I think it's basically giving the public that opportunity to be more involved in the process so that we can bring that into the engagement process.
I think that's great. It's just, with any engagement or consultation, people are somewhat cynical, I think, and wonder why they're doing it and why they should bother. If it's quick and easy, they're more likely to do it if it's fun. But I think very much proving to them that what they say will be taken into account is important. And my last question is really about the development process. So in terms of the planning guidance, you say on page 60 that that it will feed into guidance for new developments. I just wondered how far it would be embedded into planning guidance, particularly in association with changes to the planning system. So we've got changes which will affect SPDs, which won't any longer exist as such. So how will that work through to maybe supplementary planning guidance, work with the new upcoming local plan when it's adopted and so forth, so it's all sort of seamless and joined up?
Yeah, I mean, we have a TDM guide at the moment which sets out the requirements that we expect developers to deliver against when they're designing streets. I think adopting this approach will give us, I guess, more teeth in saying we want you to be doing streets that match this approach. So we can be having that early engagement with developers and saying, here's our healthy streets approach. We want to see your assessment of it, and that will be part of our assessment of the planning application. I think there are some questions around how we resource that in the pack. So we'll be seeing how well it works on our own schemes and then feeding it into the planning application process.
So I suppose it would have implications for any parking guidance, for example, where there would have to be some flexibility in relation to this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the Healthy Streets approach doesn't tell you have to do X, Y, or Z. It's literally a framework for scoring what it was before and what it was after. With a new development, that's a bit tricky. I guess there might not have been anything there before, but we can certainly get a score of what the proposal looks like, and we can benchmark that again against other schemes. But it's not dictating at all. So it's more about enabling us to have a kind of clearer framework for how we're assessing what benefits a design looks like. So in terms of the planning process, over time we'll be able to build up, if you like, this is a sort of level of score we're looking for from developments based on all the developments that we've approved over time, and we can then be having that discussion with developers and saying, you're way down here, you need to do better.
Thank you.
Tim.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think we're happy to endorse this approach. I think firstly, just to say, I note the council has been given the opportunity to undertake training in this as well, which is very, very welcome. I think the one thing that we need to be clear on is that this is a way of judging schemes and improving on them. It's not a driver for a particular scheme. I think we just need to be careful we make that sort of clear, because obviously the way to make a street as safe and as clean as possible is to get rid of the cars. But this is not this is not driving that. You have to have a scheme first, and then you apply these principles to say how can we make this scheme as clean and healthy for everybody that's using that street as possible. We need to be careful in our publicity around this, that we're not saying this is a driver for getting people off the streets, if you like, out of their cars.
And what I like about the tool is it's flexible to do all different types of streets. So if it is a busy street, which is more of a corridor, or if it's a residential street, it still works for all those different sorts of streets.
And that was going to be my follow-up, actually, because we've been discussing today about pavement parking and issues on very small, narrow streets and that kind of thing. I'm just wondering how I'm going to have a scheme in my ward that's going to try and address this, hopefully through the area committee process, where we've got a very narrow street with pavement parking and causes a lot of difficulties when during the summer months when people pile in there. I'm wondering what benefits this would be able to bring to a design of that kind, as opposed to a large thoroughfare. Can you see it helping with resolving those sorts of problems as well?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to address both points, cars have a lot of varied impacts on streets, like how they're parked and where they're parked is equally impactful as how quickly they drive up and down it. So there are lots of different ways that you can redesign a street to make it more attractive. There's a new development around the corner from where I live, and right next to it is an existing road, and the difference in those two roads is quite stark in terms of the planting and how the parking is arranged. So I think, there are certainly opportunities. Tight, narrow, old residential streets are pretty challenging at times, because we've created a society that is reliant on cars in a lot of ways and then doesn't have enough space for them at times. We've brought through residence parking scheme changes that have increased permit prices and such like to try and get rid of some of the parked cars to some extent as well. I think that's part of it, and if we can do that, then you can start maybe putting a street tree in a parking bay. So you might take one parking bay out of a street like that, to get in a tree to start improving the feel of the street. How you design that parking and how you design the street, I think there's opportunities for that. There's different costs to different elements of it as well. So when I look at the road I was talking about in the development, that probably costs a lot more than the tarmac road next to it, and we have to be cognizant of that as well. But yeah, I think this encourages designers as well to think it's not just about taking out cars, like a bench, a nice bit of planting. There are lots of different things that make a street feel nice, feel more healthy, and encourage people to walk along them. If you go to a really hot country, the streets where they're covered with trees are so much more pleasant to walk along than the streets that aren't. So, there's lots of different ways to encourage that more active travel mode rather than just saying we need to close it to cars.
So, Toby.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is a statement rather than question, but I absolutely love this approach and I will be wholeheartedly supporting it. If I could vote more than once, I would. I think it's really important that we do reframe streets as not just being places that we use for transport, but places that all of us spend a significant amount of our time, whether we're walking, cycling, or if we're in a car, or if we're on public transport, or whether we're moving, or whether we're dwelling in one place. They are a huge part of our lives, and they have an impact on our health as well. So this approach really ties that all back together. And what I do love is, as has been discussed a little bit, is that this approach isn't prescriptive about the solution. It doesn't say all streets must look like this, or it doesn't even say all residential streets should look like this and all high streets should look like this. It offers you the opportunity to come to a good, healthy street by using the right tools in the right place. And it is even possible under this approach to have a high traffic street that has a decently high healthy street score. It just means you need to think about the different intervention types that you might put in place. So I'm all for it. On a practical note, it is really important that the TDM guidance is updated, so I was glad to see that in the report. Anything we can do to accelerate that as well, because so many of our new streets, particularly in the regeneration areas and the bigger ones I'm thinking about, like St Philip's Marsh, will have a huge impact on the street network. If we can go in there with healthy streets from day one, that would be amazing. So thanks.
Yeah, just one thing I was going to highlight is I think one of the benefits of this is I guess it highlights where there are problems currently in the street. So you could say, well, actually, we can do a lot by just improving that one there, because that one's really low. That, I think like shade and shelter is really low. So if we could improve that, this street becomes a much better place. I mean, in terms of main corridors, I know we were talking the other day about schemes we did years ago on places like Wells Road and Bath Road and White Ladies Road, where we put stuff down the middle, like trees down the middle, and they're starting to get to the point now where they're becoming much more mature trees. And, a busy road can still be a reasonably pleasant road to walk along by that effect. And I actually think even Bond Street outside Cabot Circus with all the trees down the middle makes it a very different road, even though it's incredibly wide and busy. Those trees do have a calming effect.
Thanks. Kaz.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased to see on-side roads, not on-side streets, in Southmead featuring in this report as a good example. Did actually have somebody say to me on the doorstep once that it was a complete waste of money, but I think that was a very lone voice. But I have heard more voices saying that they complain about the upkeep of the vegetation and some of the infrastructure has deteriorated. You can get litter accumulating in plants, for example. So I think there will be some associated maintenance costs with this, which we need to dial in. And when we're talking about healthy, the word healthy, I was kind of mulling that one over because I know, Southmead is an area of deprivation where, and the life expectancy of a man in Southmead is 10 years less than somebody right next door in Westbourne Trim. And, there's perhaps I'm kind of worried about this term healthy in its definition in terms of health of the community. But I think healthy streets in terms of more welcoming streets, I can kind of understand. So yeah, I kind of welcome this. I'm happy to support it, and particularly just noting the words trial and follow-up. I think you mentioned that in your report, so I'm quite happy with this.
Yeah, I think we've got to be clear. Transport and active travel is not everything that leads to health. You know, there's so many different factors that contribute to people's health, but it's something we can do to make places nicer, and I think that can improve the neighbourhood health as well, as you say, by creating better spaces for people. I know we've talked to Parks about the planting. I don't know, Sean, if you wanted to update on that.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, just picking up on the maintenance, you're absolutely right, Councillor South, that there is a cost to this. So me and Adam have been proactively looking and working with our colleagues in Parks about what does the long-term maintenance look like and how can we fund this, and using some of, should we say, our income through restrictions and things that should actually do on a network, actually proactively using that funding to maintain these sorts of interventions so that we can make the streets healthier, look better for residents and communities, and actually proactively sort of push that funding which comes through those interventions through to funding sort of a long term, so we can maintain these into the future. As Adam says, I was actually the contract manager for the Wells Road, installing those trees, and now I actually come in that way to work and driving down Wells Road. I actually, so a nice feel of success and achievement, because the Wells Road now is looking very different to how it did, say, 10, 15 years ago when they were little saplings, and now they're this big, and there's actually a tree trench all the way down from the middle, so those trees will continue to flourish. And those are the sorts of interventions we do. So as Adam says, if we can look into parking bays, that's actually the best place to place trees at the moment, actually would be into the carriageway, because our footways are absolutely full of utilities. Trying to get them in there is almost unachievable. But you've only got your gas mains, your water main, and your sewer generally in the carriageway, which means there's a lot more space. But that does mean the sacrifice of parking. But it will then, and there's also the environmental benefits through heat reduction. I'm actually one for actually planting trees into the highway in design pits so that actually stops the heat affecting the carriageway and so on. So there's lots of fringe benefits around these healthy streets. And Adam also commented on the QA. I chair the QA, and should we say all members of the QA board are endorsing and very much in favour of this approach.
And I think it's fair to say that we've had that conversation about maintenance, and we're looking at the transport investment plan that's on the forward plan for this committee as something that really needs to think about that. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I'm probably more sceptical than this, and builds on what Councillor Rippington was saying. I think a lot of the ideas in this are good. Genuinely, I do. But I can see this very quickly becoming a driver for anti-car measures. And the evidence and the examples you quote in the report would sustain that. Healthy Streets was adopted as a policy in London in 2017 and 18, and then used as a lot of the driver and justification for a lot of the LTNs that were installed, and then ripped out because they would prove deeply unpopular and didn't really work. So my fear, I'm sorry, Croydon Council just got sued. They're going to have to give us $7 million back. I mean, that was announced 2 months ago, Chair. So you can... Well, that's happening now. Wandsworth installed them and had removed them in some cases within hours. So, that was used as the driver and justification for this. Now, depending on the scheme that's introduced, it could be really beneficial. It really could be. But I can see that this will be used as the driver that Councillor Rippington said to push through schemes that I don't think will work. And when we talk about making them accessible, and we quote things like the how it will support disabled people, which I think is on page 57 of our report. Well, we've seen in the EBLN that actually disabled people are the ones crying out the most because they've had a lot of what they want to do blocked. So for me today, Chair, I can't vote for this. I will abstain on this because I think this will be used as a stick to beat us as justifying anti-car measures when actually we need to use those measures in the suburbs. So I'll be abstaining, Chair. At least I'm consistent for you.
And noted, Mark, I'd just say that I think this is a way not necessarily of driving new schemes, but improving the schemes that we do put in place. So I think I note your scepticism, and I'm going to move on to Emma for the last questions, words, or...
Yes, thank you. I'm just thinking there's also some of the most successful livable neighbourhoods in London as well, such as Lambeth and Waltham Forest. So just looking at the corporate strategy alignment, this is, I obviously think this is absolutely brilliant. And this is being brought to us as a transport scheme, and a lot of this will be around transport and highways. But when you look at the corporate strategy sort of aims, it also does talk about environment and sustainability, healthcare and well-being and things. I just wondered if there is any sort of scope for almost a bit of, making sure that the other committees are aware of this, that they can also align in some of the work that they do, maybe even share funding where where we can, especially things like street trees and improving tree canopy, which I know is an objective of the Environment and Sustainability Committee. Also, streets, we are talking about the highways, carriageways, pavements, but, when you look at things like waste, when there's wheelie bins blocking the pavements, that makes it very inaccessible for people with pushchairs and disabled people, fly tipping, obviously. If those kind of design schemes can then be built in with maybe a little bit of input from other committees, would there be scope to sort of make this a little bit broader in certain situations? I know you talked about parks earlier, so I could kind of hear that there is a bit of crossover that's naturally going to happen.
I mean, we can certainly brief other committees if that would be welcome, or we could do an all-councillor briefing. If we haven't done that already, quite happy to do that. And I think, it does have wider impacts. I've had a discussion with a public health colleague. They were talking about how they were assessing their impacts on active travel. And I was saying to them, public like health and the NHS could quite easily invest in these sort of schemes and get good value for the money that you're investing over a long-term period of time. So I certainly think there is scope for that. And I know livable neighbourhood schemes are controversial, but they do have impacts on bins, they do have impacts on health, they do have impacts on lots of different things. And similarly, lots of transport schemes do. So the more we can do that engagement and extend it into other committees, quite happy to do that. I mean, anyone can carry out the assessment with the training. And you could argue that doing a scheme that changes how the bins are done on a street could make it healthier as much as a transport scheme could.
Thank you. Just looking at that scope. My final little point as well is in terms of engagement, this is something I think primary schools in particular would be really interested to look at and feed into, not only for their school routes, but the areas around their school. I know we have school streets, but if this is slightly more permanent schemes, I think that would be really good sort of stakeholders to work with.
Yeah, I mean, the school streets team do a huge amount of work with schools to get them on board with school streets. So engaging with this sort of thing, I think, would be a good idea as well. I'll talk to the team about it.
Thank you.
Did you want to come in for the last word, Kath?
Yes, I just wanted to respond to Councillor Weston's point, because I know he likes to come to Southmead, Labour held Southmead, because he was there just on Monday evening, in fact. And do you drive there, Mark? So he drives, and you can drive down Arnside Road without any problems. In fact, there's a much nicer place to walk across the road. And I think there's many instances in Southmead where we have good examples of this, like Eldbury Walk as well. And we even have some of these things called modal filters, which I prefer to call roadblocks, which seem to work very well. So Southmead, I think, is a very good example of healthy streets and a livable neighbourhood.
Let's move on. Yes, this could balloon out to a much wider discussion. I think I am going to move that we approve the standard adoption of the Healthy Streets approach for transport projects and the tools and so on, and crucially, a very small amount of additional capital recharge required to incorporate it. Would anyone like to second that? I'm going to go for Toby because that's kind of your extra little vote there, isn't it, that you wish you had. All those in favour, could you put your hands up? So that is 8 people, everyone except Councillor Weston. Those against, nobody, and abstaining is Councillor Weston. Right, let's move on. Agenda item 11. We're on to the quarterly performance report, quarter 3. And it's not lost on me that this was a report that covers, it's taken a long time to filter through the system. This is a report that covers the period, whatever it is, October to December 2025, and we're just catching up with our tail now. So I'm not sure if it's Patsy. Patsy, would you like to just introduce us on the latest performance metrics?
Thank you, Chair. This report updates the Committee on Performance for Q3 25-26. Appendix 2 has of the performance report that covers all performance measures specific to this committee. An overall summary, 100% of all performance metrics are on target. 67 of city outcome measures are on or better than target. And 56% of business plan actions are on track. That's 5 out of the 9. Specific points that the report points out. The number of potholes reported is 961 against a target of 1,000. I will say this has got steadily worse, and when you get the Q4 report, you will see a rise in that, but that is due to the consistent rain for the first 4 months of this year, and we have got a plan in place to address it. The second point to note is bus passenger numbers, both metrics, an increase in the number of journeys by park and ride into Bristol, and an increase in the number of passenger journeys on buses. Both are performing better than the same period last year at Q3, and both metrics are approaching the numbers seen pre-pandemic in 2019. The areas for improvement: road safety, reduce the number of people killed or seriously injured in road traffic accidents, and the data report is noted as provisional. Pedestrian casualties accounted for 21%, that's 30 people. This is falling year on year. Cyclists was 31%, 44 people, rising year after year. Car and taxi users, 18%, that's 25, rising year on year. And motorcycle users, 23%, 33 people, again rising year on year. Other road users, including e-scooters, 7%, which is falling year on year. And killed or seriously injured casualties overall was 41% higher than the same period last year. 101 people last year, 142 people this year. The committee is asked to note the latest quarterly performance report.
Thank you, Patsy. Nick, your hand's gone up very quickly.
Thanks. I've got a specific question, but first about the navigation. I think we've got an appendix on the 9 business plan actions, but you've told us that we have met our 1 performance metric and 2 out of 3 city outcomes, but I don't think the paper tells us what the performance metrics or city outcomes are. I'm sure you know off the top of your head.
Oh, sorry. Performance metrics is on page 97, but the business plan actions are just prior to that. And I'm trying to find the 98. Page 98 for city outcomes.
Okay, sorry, we have more appendices than the website shows. All right. My specific question then is about our second business plan action around the workplace parking levy and the, is that one it? No, third one, and residence parking scheme, which has gone from green to amber. I know that the workplace parking levy is delayed further. How about the residence parking schemes?
I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Adam, as that falls within his area.
I mean, we're taking it forward. We have resource challenges in that area. We've just brought in some agency resource, and we are recruiting at the moment. I think that's probably why it's at orange, but we are delivering them we're bringing them forward as quick as we can. So yeah, I mean, I can get a more detailed response for you if you want from the project manager to say out exactly where we are, if that would help.
Yeah, that would help, because it's been a year since we approved the scheme and I've heard nothing.
I think I've been frustrated as well, and I've been asking for a monthly update report, which I'm told is coming this month for the first time. So make sure that we get some sort of baseline information on that project to particularly the councillors whose wards are affected. I've got Tim, Serena, did you want to come straight back on that?
Yeah, I think if that could be circulated to everyone, all committee members, Chair, that'd be useful.
Yeah.
Get
So
lots of
if we could, I think there's a baseline programme just about being defined now, isn't there, Adam? So if we could circulate that both to the committee and to the affected ward members, that's an action we'll take away, please. I'm not sure. You can decide amongst yourself, Tim and Kaz. I think your hands both went up.
Yeah, just very quickly, be remiss of me not to welcome the continuing increases in bus numbers. I can't remember whether our night bus services would have been included in Q3, because I can't remember when they started. Did they start in October? September. So hopefully they will have contributed to the increased passenger numbers, because I know they're doing, having seen some of the figures, that they are doing quite well, and it's good to see.
I think it'd be great if we could get another action to get some information, and we have to be careful about commercial in confidence stuff, but some information about how our CAS-funded supported services are going. So I think that would be something. Could we take an action that we would circulate some of that information with all the usual caveats when we get it? To the committee.
The Task and Finish group?
To the committee and the members of the Task and Finish group. That's a good idea. Kaz?
Just one question on page 97, number of potholes marked as green. My own perception, this has been quite a bad year for potholes, so I find that a little bit surprising. So the number is 1,000. Has that been consistent over the years? Why have you chosen 1,000?
So that's number of potholes reported. So it's the public reports as well as my safety inspections.
Why is the target 1,000?
Yeah. So the target is that's roughly an average for that time of year. Obviously, it increases as we get into winter and January. You're absolutely correct, Coach, yourself, and Patsy did mention that the next quarter with the consistent rain, we've actually gone way above target and not met that target. However, I would say we are very close to being back on top to where we were previous to that extended rainfall, and we're sort of nearly there in relation to catching up to the sheer increase. We did invest more resources in, and obviously it's put quite a lot of pressure, so my officers have been working overtime and things like that to try and get on top of the backlog, because that first few months of this year was challenging.
So we put you put extra overtime on, and we went from 8 to 10 crews responding.
Yeah. So
I think in terms of what I'd like to see, if it's possible, and I know we've got a corporate set of targets, that's very much input-led, isn't it? How many people are reporting potholes? So I think it would be really useful if we could see something about how quickly we're turning them around. And I know you've got all that information through the whole kind of system.
Yeah, so we do have that information through our asset management confirmed system. We have 3 schedules of repair, which is basically 2 hour if it's deemed an immediate emergency, or within 24 hours if possible, depending on the risk analysis. 10 days is our standard to try and get repairs done within 10 days, which is actually ahead of 28 days, which is our outside, which we actually say is more a planned approach. Right? It's not that, it needs repair, but it's not a high risk. So 10 days is quite often, and I can ask the team to pull off a report of what potholes have been repaired to what timescales and within those timescales.
And what I was interested to see was the analysis between Fix My Street and the highways inspectors, because I think that's the really interesting thing, because actually if we get a lot more reported, that could be a good thing, because it means people have faith in the system that's worth reporting them through. So I think it's the more metrics we've got on this, and I think we could all, I'm not going to allow us to go down a sort of a wormhole of anecdotal information, but it'd be really good if we could get a little bit more kind of context than just the very high level corporate indicator, because I know you've got all that at your fingertips, Sean.
Yes, we do have, like I said, we're data-led, the thing, so it's very much at my fingertips. I will say it's surprising that actually, when I show you the results, you'll see actually we pick up more defects for our inspections than we actually do get reported from the public. Around about 70-30.
I'm going to, Toby, Last comment.
And it's a good news story. So I just wanted to come back on the bus passengers. It's really good to see that going in a fantastic direction, and that in a few quarters' time we may well be saying we're at the highest number of bus passengers ever on record. Just my question was, when did those records actually start?
So, I mean, it started a long time. I would say if you went back to 2012, 2013 time, you'd be talking about sort of 26 million trips. We got to about 42 million just before the pandemic. So over kind of 7 to 8 years, we saw a really significant increase. We are still increasing. The increases are getting smaller. So we've had the fare increase that has come in, for example, over the last year or so, which is clearly impacting growth of people returning to buses. So we're increasing, but it's increasing less than it increased before. We're not quite at the previous, the pre-pandemic level yet. So we've still got a way to go. It's good to see the park and rides recovering, because they were the ones that fell the most and recovered most slowly.
So we've got work to do.
Go on then.
Sorry, Chair. I was wondering about bus passenger numbers and usage, if we think it's ever going to return to pre-pandemic levels, because of the change in work patterns. So people are tending to work, well, some people are, more from home, maybe do 2-3 days in the office. Is that something that we factored in really to future forecasts?
That was actually something I was going to say, is that given the changing work patterns, I think it's remarkable that I'd almost say that it maybe as a proportion of journeys, we're seeing the growth is even higher than we're seeing than just the absolute numbers. But Adam.
Yeah, so I think we're sort of 40.5, going to kind of 41-ish million, that sort of level. So pre-pandemic we were about 42 million. So we're pretty close to being pre-pandemic. We're not at pre-pandemic yet, but we are close to it. We're doing a whole programme of schemes under CRSTS to improve public transport across the area. There is a lot more revenue money going into buses as well through the bus funding that the government is giving, which WECA are using in various different ways to encourage usage of the bus. Some of it's fare promotions, some of it's new services, etc. So, and we will be bringing a paper in July that will be looking at additional bus funding as well. So, there's lots of money going in, there's lots of infrastructure going in. We need to keep growing it. I think the pandemic was an unfortunate drop in patronage, and you're right, people with different working patterns are using transport differently. But it is really encouraging that we are nearly back to where we were.
I've just seen it in my own ward, the level of buses, the improved buses themselves, so the electric green buses, the frequency is all fantastic. And you could excitingly get to Clifton Village now. Who knew that was possible from Clifton Down? So that's brilliant by bus.
It's not perfect everywhere, as we know. And we've had a couple of comments about that in a statement from another councillor expressing some concerns about some of the buses. I think if the records had gone back to before 1985, we might have seen much higher numbers. But ever since bus deregulation, I think we've seen increasingly it's not been great for the bus market. I'm going to ask the committee to note the report as per the recommendation and move us on to the last item on the agenda, which is the corporate risk report. This is to provide an update on current significant risks relevant to this committee. And I think I'm right in saying this is the last time, or pretty much the last time we see it in this format, because actually Transport and Sean, you've been working to look at a slightly more information into the risk report. But so I don't want to steal your thunder, but so it looks like Patsy, you're going to introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, the report updates the committee on the current strategic risks relevant to this committee, achieving their corporate objectives set out in the corporate strategy 25 to 30, and summarises progress as at Q4 25-26. You only have one corporate risk on the register that relates to this committee, which is CRR 58, which is unable to adequately maintain and replace the highway, traffic, parking and docks infrastructure assets. The risk remains static at 28, Officers' comments at Q4 outlines that we are still experiencing failure of assets before funding is available to repair. The risk remains static until we can secure additional funding. The team are also working with the corporate risk team to reposition this risk in line with the thematic approach, which will give the team more scope to report on the sub-risks and a greater level of detail in their reporting. Executive directors reviewed all risks on March the 9th, which informed the current risk register. A risk is deemed static if the score remains unchanged for 3 or more reporting periods. All risks in the corporate risk register have management actions in place, and the committee is asked to note this report. There is a de-escalation. There were 2 risks at the last report. However, let me find it, CR43, possible failure to deliver CRSTS by 1st of March 2027, which means that several key sustainable transport improvements will not have been completed or delivered, has been de-escalated, so it's no longer on the corporate risk. And the ask is the committee notes the report.
Thank you, Patsy. And what was really nice is that we did the CRSTS, our colleagues in the Combined Authority commissioned a report to make sure that the fact that we're doing a lot of work over the coming months on a number of key parts of the network, they commissioned some consultants to make sure that we were managing it well, and I think we came back with a very clean bill of health. And I'd just like to thank all the transport officers for the hard work that and the ringing endorsement really of the consultants that showed that it's very well managed and very well thought through. So thank you. Anyone like to comment on the Nick?
Thanks. We used to have quite an overlap between Transport Committee and Audit Committee, and now I think it's just me, so I'll try and bring some best practice. Just a quick question on that de-escalated risk. Ed has given us a narrative which is quite positive around that, but I don't think that the report says that the risk has reduced, has it? It's just not being reported to us anymore. Is that right?
It is not being reported, but it was, if I haven't done the latest risk assessment yet, it will be reduced at the latest assessment. So the assessment remained, that the level was high because we had resourcing issues. We then brought in more resource, so that bit of it was reducing, but then we had more challenge from the Combined Authority around the programme and getting the rebaselining done. We've now completed the rebaselining, so we have a kind of agreed programme, both in terms of funding and dates going forward. So the next risk assessment will reflect that we are now well-resourced, we are well-structured in terms of delivery, we've considered all the construction impacts, and we have a rebaselined programme that we are happy with, if you like.
Okay, so the Q1 report, we won't see it because it's been de-escalated, but also it has improved. That's good. So on the risk that is in front of us, I appreciate you're working within the constraints of the risk management system, but you can write literally whatever you like in the cover report. And so there was the opportunity of telling us a little bit more about this risk, so as a committee we can understand it, which is a point that I made, I think, 6 months ago when we looked at this before, that simply having one big risk, the biggest in the council's register, saying that something might break somewhere in the city somewhen, doesn't help us to understand the problem and to help you fix it. Can you sort of break it down a little bit for us? What actually is the problem that we're talking about?
So it's not just in transport, it's the harbour as well. So we have a city that was built 200 years ago, and that infrastructure is all around the same age, whether it be around the harbour, whether it be the new cut, whether it be the bridges that are 100 to 200 years old. All of that infrastructure is failing. I think when Sean takes you out, that will be really, really informative to show you the state that the city is in. I mean, there are actions below every single risks, and Sean has to fill in exactly what he's doing about that. Now, what we do is we look for funding everywhere. It's not just capital funding or strategic SIL funding from the council. We're currently compiling a bid to go to the DIG-FT structures. John and I are working on a project to look at our Bristol infrastructure in general, to look at how we can access potentially more national funding to address the problem. We are very much in a reactive cycle because we only have the funding to fix the critical of the critical, then we are reacting. We're reacting to what's the most risk straight away, even though we know that it's much more economic, it's much more effective to do preventative, so to be fixing things before they get to a critical stage. And the business case we are working on, which we're very happy to share with you, outlines that case to yet to be determined ministers, DFT, Environment Agency, that we aim to engage with them on to try and address this and have a more transformative approach to repairs than the current, this is what we've got funding for, this is all we can fix this year because that's all we can afford. When I said to you before, when I left my team alone, I came back and there was £72 million on there. Last year, just to put it in context, the whole capital pot available for every directorate in the council was 40 million. And when I say 72, that's their idea of putting their most critical down. It's, you know, the shortfall is around 200 million.
So we might be at cross purposes, but there's a risk here which is rated critical and it is almost certain to happen. In our 100-page agenda, we've got 3 pages on it that doesn't explain what it is that we're so worried about, and I've just asked you what it is, and you're not telling me that.
Nick, with all due respect, I think we've had a number of reports to this committee which highlight the problem with the harbour walls, highlight the problem with the bridges. We've approved quite a lot of money. I think the last committee or the one before, we approved £500,000 just to assess what needs to be done on the Avon Fix Bridge. So I think, yes, in isolation, this doesn't tell us very much, but I think over the course of the last year or two, we've had quite a lot of reports through to this committee which clearly identify what the priority problems are. So I'm not quite sure. Are you saying you want to see all that information all over again in this report?
I feel that if we are looking at risks, and as a committee, we are responsible for the biggest risk in the entire council risk register, then it does deserve more than a couple of pages and the understanding that, well, we probably talked about it a year ago on a different topic. So, yeah, I think that we should take it more seriously, and I'm glad that we're changing the structure for the next cycle, which, as Patsy has said, we'll look at this in more detail.
And we'd be very happy to provide a briefing, maybe when we arrange the day out to show you in person what we're talking about. We'd be very happy to do a briefing face-to-face as well.
And I think what we're doing is you're pioneering a new way of reporting, Patsy and Sean, and I think a really good time when we first see that next new risk report under its new format, that would be a really good time that we provide some really good quality feedback so that that new pioneering approach can maximise the information that we get. I think that's probably enough said, is it? Yep. Tom, you were wanting to come in?
I was actually going to make the suggestion that's just been made that perhaps an additional briefing would be helpful. I'm also conscious we've got a couple of new members of the Transport Committee as well. I'm sure they'd like to see a bit more of the detail as well.
I can assure you there won't be any surprises in there. It will be things like Brislington Bridge, Avon Fix Bridge, you know, things that we know about, but we just haven't got the funding to fix.
I'm not suggesting there will be any surprise. I think just a briefing would be helpful to update on the latest position.
We can arrange that.
I think the other way of doing this could be that Tim and I were looking this morning at a report that's coming forth to July committee about a bid we're making to the Structures Fund for the government. And I think it might be a really good idea to really flesh out the bit about the other options considered and give us a bit more information about how the particular bid that we're going to put into the government has got to the top. And that might be, rather than an entirely separate briefing, maybe we could do a little bit more work in that report just to sort of flesh out what Nick's asking for.
Yeah, the life cycle modelling also comes into this because that highlights the ongoing funding requirements to keep the network safe and so on. Absolutely, I've been working with the risk team to come up with this theme. We've actually got a theme set. we needed CLB endorsement for the approach before I could actually go in. I didn't want to spend lots of time and effort doing something which then didn't get my senior support, should we say, or needed to change or alter. So we've done the theme, the actual theme is done. What I now need to do is put that detail into there, Councillor Coombs, so that I can actually say, and it will be Avon Fixed Bridge, Brislington Bridge, all these assets, but it would also be broadly carriageway investment, all those things which will need to be within that risk.
Your team some time ago did a briefing about kind of the fact, particularly on carriageways, looking at a 30-year kind of managed decline on current funding levels. So rather than, let's recirculate that to all the members of the committee as well, shall we? So that's an action. Just there's an existing briefing, and it was looking 30 years out. So I don't suppose it's changed very much in the last 6 or 9 months.
It hasn't, but we do update it every year. So I would say we're in the process of actually doing that now. So I don't know if it's worth me actually coming forward with the updated for the life cycle briefing rather than giving you old data and then 2 months down the line giving you the new data.
Let's exceed expectations on that way. Thank you, Sean. I'm going to recommend that the committee notes this report. Probably somewhere in my script it tells me, it says thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to Mark for staying with us for the entire duration of the committee. And the next meeting of this policy committee is planned for 5 p.m. on the 9th of July 2026. So I'll see you all there.